Potawatomi. Don't laugh, but I don't know anything about that. My dad is too, but his family has been full Christian for what feels like forever. So we have a connection with who we are, but we don't really do any of the tribal religions and stuff. I do live in the northeast part of the state inside of Topeka, and I have this coworker that lives on the Potawatomi res, and he believes in the tribal religions and legends and everything else. This is a story of something that happened the other year. I don't really understand any of the things that happened, but here it goes. It was late November. We just had a huge blizzard slam through Kansas. In some areas there were about 7+ inches of snow. Because of the storm that was coming, the warehouse workers, which included me and my coworker, we all got off early. My coworker called me up and asked me if I wanted to go deer hunting. I said sure, whatever, but who even hunts deer in a snowstorm? He has no windows in a half-finished house, and he uses sheets to keep the air from coming in. He sleeps on the floor on the mattress. He has like 100 guns which lay everywhere. He also has a huge wood-burning stove from the late 1800s that he uses for everything. It might sound a little bit rough, but he built the place himself, and he's quite happy about it. Very proud of what he's done. At that point it was just lightly snowing, so I figured I would go with him. I let my dad know, and he told me just to be ready in case the storm gets bad. I grabbed my Remington, and I drove 30 minutes north. I packed some soft-tip rounds and finally got up there, and went out to the forest with my coworker to go get some deer. Not even 10 minutes into our hunt, we were going through a line of pine trees along a fence line, when we spotted a dead buck. He must have been dead for about 30 minutes or so. The blood was still kind of fresh and everything. At this point the storm was getting worse, but my coworker decided that he was just going to take it apart right there, and I thought I didn't even need to use my gun. But as we got close to it, we noticed that the buck had been absolutely ripped apart. The only thing on the carcass was the rear legs. Right away, I had a bad feeling about this. I loaded my gun. There's no way a coyote can do that level of damage. Maybe a mountain lion. There's been sightings in the area, but not to the point that it makes somebody worry. It was weird. It looked like somebody had force-fed a deer a stick of dynamite and then blew it up. Its rib cage had been pried open as if something had forced it apart and split it open. There was meat here and there, and fur everywhere. Half of its torso had been just torn apart. There was a small blood trail leading off. My friend's demeanor changed right away. He had me squat down with him. The more that we examined the damage, the more creeped out he got. He even started whispering, "He did this. We need to get out of the area right fucking now." I was like, "Are you serious, dude? It could have been just a mountain lion." And then he said, "No, they wouldn't do this. It tore this buck apart out of rage. It's a warning, and it's gonna come back to trash the carcass even more." We were able to get 2 legs, and then we just went back instead. And when I say we went back, he seriously sprinted all the way back, to the point where I had to keep up with him. He was hauling ass and he was obviously terrified. We got back to his cabin, and right away he started talking to his mom on the phone in his own native language. Now I don't know the language at all, so I did record it to have my dad try and decipher what they were talking about. After about 30 minutes or so, his mom actually came, and she was basically flipping her shit. She even told me to grab my stuff and just go home. However, before she let me go, she told me to be safe. At this point I'm curious, so I ask, "What's going on? I don't understand anything, but y'all are scaring me. Can you just explain to me what's going on?" But she didn't. She basically dragged me out in the middle of the raging blizzard and had me get in my truck. She even gave me a Coca-Cola to sip on the way back home. I had to drive slowly, and it took forever to get back home. I showed my dad the video of the conversation that my friend had on the phone. When he listened, he stood up. He walked into the other room, grabbed a hammer, and I kid you not, he smashed my phone. It made me jump when he did this. I was like, "What the hell, Dad?" And he simply said, "This never happened. Don't ever talk about this again." Clearly, he was freaked out just like my friend was. And I never did confront my dad again about what was said. I have gone to work and I asked my friend about it. He basically brushes me off. He tells me not to worry, that everything's been taken care of. But he says that we should go squirrel hunting soon, but in a different area. I almost forgot to mention, he did let me have the legs. They ended up at my sister's place in her deep freezer. But at this point, I don't know if I should touch them or anything. The following story will be told from the perspective of a wife. About a year ago, my husband and I decided to spend Thanksgiving at a cabin up north. We found it online through a site that we have used in the past, and we booked it for a week. The owner warned us that it can be hard to get back to in the winter because of the snow. The cabin was outside of Pine Top, Arizona, way outside. It was 35 miles from the nearest town and 18 miles from the nearest paved road. Aaron and I were not worried, since our Jeep had snow tires, and we were also bringing some chains just in case. We were planning on starting a family the following year, and we wanted one last romantic getaway with just the two of us. We arrived on a Friday afternoon. We had made excellent time on the drive as there was actually very little snow on the ground. We decided to take a tour of the cabin before we unloaded the car. The cabin, it was named Paradise Pine. It was 3 stories tall, and it was built into the side of a mountain. The top floor was simply the master bedroom, which was connected to a 2nd-story patio balcony through a sliding glass door. The front door was located on the ground floor, along with the kitchen and living room, and the basement housed a washer, a dryer, and a wood furnace that heated the cabin through a large pipe that extended throughout the cabin, all 3 floors. Even though the views through the bay windows were beautiful, the first thing we noticed when we walked in was that the cabin hadn't been cleaned. Oftentimes with these properties, the owner will offer to waive the $150 cleaning fee if you are willing to clean the place yourself before you leave. Most people do this, but when they don't, the owner ends up sending a cleaning crew. The previous people in this cabin had clearly decided not to clean, and I guess also not to inform the owner that they were leaving it dirty, since it was a holiday and a snowstorm was forecasted for early next week. We decided to clean the cabin ourselves, and we were planning on asking the owner to reduce our bill whenever we left the following Friday. We brought everything in from the Jeep and got to work with dishes and laundry. Afterwards, we made an easy dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and we played a few games on the pool table in the living room. The weather outside started to go down at 6 in the evening, and I asked my husband Aaron to go down and light the furnace in the basement. I went up to the bedroom to wash my face and change into some warmer clothes. The bathroom connecting to our bedroom didn't have a door. It also had a broken mirror and a torn down shower curtain. Wow, there's been some cowboys in here. They hadn't even bothered to pick up the glass up off the floor. I did so carefully, regretting the stupidity of the drunken idiots who must have stayed here the week before. I took a few photos with my phone, and I plan to send them to the owner when we got back to town on Monday. I didn't want to be charged for damage inflicted by the previous people. I met Aaron on the ground level, and I told him about the bathroom. That's not the only thing that's broken. The light's out in the basement, and I couldn't find the flashlight. I was able to find the furnace though. I squirted some of that cheap vodka your sister sent in there. I threw in a match and hoped for the best. It seems to be working. I said. I can feel the heat coming through. I held my hands up to the metal pipe that worked its way around the cabin. Let's keep the basement door shut. It's freezing down here. One of our favorite things to do when staying at a cabin is to read through all the journal entries of all the previous guests. It's always stuff like went fishing with the kids, had a barbecue, played cards with the family. But sometimes you'll find something more interesting, like I got drunk and set a tree on fire. We found the Paradise Pine diary and snuggled up on the couch. Erin started reading the first few entries before I decided to take over. We were about halfway through the book when we called it a night and went to bed. The following evening we stayed up late as we had a long nap that day. The plan had been to go on a hike, but it was too cold outside. Lucky for us, the furnace in the basement was still burning. We spent the whole day around the living room. After dinner, Erin got on the pool table as I started reading from the journal, starting where we had left off. I read for about an hour before getting to the journal entry of the people who had stayed before us. I was very interested in this one. These people must have had a good story. The writer even wrote down his entries with dates and time, and I could already tell the handwriting sort of disintegrated as the days went on. They must have been drunk all weekend. Look how messy the handwriting gets. I held the book up to Erin. Can you read it? He asked, putting the 8-ball into a pocket. Well, of course. I'm great at reading other people's shitty handwriting by now. I smirked and took another sip of wine before beginning to read. Sunday, November 4th, 3:30 p.m. What a beautiful cabin. My wife and I booked this place for 2 weeks on a whim, and we can't believe how lucky we got. Barely made it back here with the truck. There's snow everywhere, at least a foot deep, and it's below 40 degrees outside. Thankfully, the furnace in the basement is huge, as promised by Marissa, so the whole cabin is warm and cozy. Monday, November 5th, 11:30 a.m. We're snowed in. We wanted to run home today to grab a few things we forgot, but that's definitely not happening. The road is not good, so I guess we're going nowhere. Looks like we'll be spending most of the day inside drinking and playing poker. As you can see, we're not too upset about it. Tuesday, November 6th, 7:25 p.m. My wife Sarah is currently cooking up a delicious roast chicken, and I'm finally gonna start writing. This is the reason we came here, and I refuse to waste the opportunity to cure my writer's block. It's beautiful here, and I still haven't written down a damn thing. I also saw someone walking around the tree line today. I have no idea how they're surviving out there. We're not even going outside. It was 34 degrees the last I checked. Wednesday, November 7th, 9 p.m. Sarah and I made a snowman and snow angels, so we're taking full advantage of it. I haven't been able to write anything new, but I did edit the previous 2 chapters of my book. I think the beauty of this place is just too distracting. Sort of. I'm kidding. I think we may have neighbors. I was having a cigarette out on the balcony last night, and I saw someone at the tree line again, extremely tall and close enough to say hello, but whenever I waved, he walked back into the woods. I'm gonna ask Marissa about this. She didn't mention any neighbors nearby. Thursday, November 8th, 1 p.m. This morning, I woke up to find animal tracks all around the outside of the cabin. I don't know what sort of animal made them. The prints were the shape of a rectangle, almost like they were made by the end of a 2x4. By this time, Sarah got up at 11. The snow had mostly melted, but you could still kind of see them. I think last night's snow is the last that we'll get in a while. The sky is looking pretty clear. Sarah thinks I'm starting to get cabin fever, so I guess today we're gonna go for a hike since it's beautiful outside. Friday, November 9th, 7 a.m. Last night, someone tried getting into the cabin. I woke up at about 1 in the morning to the sound of banging on the front door. Not knocking, fucking banging. I went downstairs and grabbed the pool stick. I asked who it was, and the sound stopped. I waited a few minutes and then opened the door. There was nothing there. I went back up the stairs to wake up Sarah. She is a heavy sleeper. That's when the banging sounded again. It was urgent this time, and it was coming from the other side of the room, on the wall next to the bookshelf. It stopped after a long minute, and I sat down on the steps and waited all night for them to try something. Nothing happened after that. Friday, November 9th, 2 p.m. I told Sarah what happened, and she wants to leave. I'm not really convinced though, but Sarah does get scared easily. I will admit that I'm a bit on edge. I tried to start the car this morning, but nothing happened. I'm not a car guy, and I have no idea what to do. We can't hike outside. There's no signal out here, and we can't find a house phone. We talked about it and decided that we're just gonna wait it out here. I know people have this cabin rented out on the 16th, so we'll just have to wait the week for them. I did find a wood axe, which I'm keeping in the bedroom, just in case they come back to harass us. I think it might be a homeless person living out in the woods. There were tracks around the house again this morning, and I'm no longer convinced that they're from an animal. We'll see if they come back. Saturday, 5 a.m. Last night the knocking was back, but it was something knocking on the sliding door to our bedroom from the second story patio. I don't know how it climbed up there. It knocked on the window. A thin curtain covers the sliding glass door, so I couldn't see what it was. The knocking finally stopped, and a full minute later it started again, becoming this loud, insistent banging of the night before, and I grabbed a handy axe. I got out of bed as she screamed. By the time that I got to the sliding door, the sound had stopped. I threw back the curtain, but there was nobody there. However, in the moonlight, I saw it walking away from the cabin, back to the tree line. Sarah then stumbled over to the window, and I showed her what I was looking at. She covered her face and started crying. What we saw terrified us both. It's not human. I know it's not. It's tall, maybe 10 feet, and skinny. It looks like a black stick figure, and possibly thin. It has no hands or feet, and it has no face. Just a black oval, with no features. The contrast was horrifying. This tall, black stick man walking through the snow. When it got to the trees, it disappeared. I spent the next hour trying to calm Sarah down. She said we need to leave, and I think she's right. When we were finally calmed down enough, we laid down in bed again. Felt myself slowly start to drift off. It was out of the silence that the knocking came again. This time, on our bedroom door. I jumped out of bed and grabbed the axe again. Sarah backed into a corner and screamed. By the time that I threw open the door, the knocking had stopped. There was nothing there, but the front door was wide open. Saturday, 5 p.m. I'm terrified. My wife is terrified. Today I consider setting the car on fire, just to see if the smoke would attract somebody's attention. Sarah wouldn't let me because it's our only way out, so we packed the car up instead. Maybe when the snow melts more, we'll be able to fix the car. I then spot Sarah staring off a lot, and she hasn't really said anything ever since she saw it. Seeing this thing, it's affected me too. I've been having migraines today, and I never had a migraine before. I want to protect my wife, but I'm not sure what to do. I even caught Sarah staring at me, almost in a trance earlier. I did ask her what was wrong, and she just said, "It eats us." She seemed to snap out of it pretty quickly after that, and she asked me why I was staring at her. She doesn't remember saying it, and I guess we can't figure out what it means. This thing is starting to fuck with our heads, I know that. Sunday, 10 a.m. Last night I stayed up all night. It's lightly snowing. All was quiet. Sunday, 7 p.m. I found some footprints this afternoon on the upstairs balcony. Same rectangle once the stickman makes. It was outside our window again. I brushed them off way before Sarah could see them. It stopped snowing an hour ago, and it's twilight now. I can see him out in the trees. I saw him turn around and walk back into the woods. He is thin as a piece of paper. I think something's gonna happen. I think we're gonna end up dying here. Monday, November 12th, 9 a.m. Last night I went out on the balcony at around 8 for a cigarette. I heard a noise behind me, and I turned to see this fucking stickman on the roof, 5 feet above me. I ran back inside to grab the axe, and I screamed at Sarah to get ready. I turned around to run back outside, and I heard the stickman running above me on the roof. When I got outside, this thing was gone. That's when I saw it running off into the trees again. But it was different. It was taller. I think there's more than one. When I got back inside, Sarah had locked herself in the upstairs bathroom. She was hysterical and kept saying that she was gonna die here. I tried to give her the pool stick, but she wouldn't open the door. I sat on the bed and waited. At some point, Sarah must have fallen asleep because all was quiet. It was then that I heard it walking around in the kitchen. I backed away from the bedroom door. All my courage was gone. It was inside. I waited for more sounds from the kitchen, but nothing came. After a few minutes, I finally heard something. It was climbing the stairs, slowly but loud. I banged the bedroom door from my side and told it to leave us alone. Sarah started screaming again, sobbing. It could hurt me, but I wasn't gonna let it hurt my family. It then stopped when it got to the top step. I could feel it on the other side of the door. It didn't make a noise. I tried to think of a strategy that would give me the upper hand if it attacked. I finally decided that if I threw the door open, it would knock the stickman down the stairs. On the count of 3, I turned the handle and kicked the door. It swinged open, and I saw the stickman. He was still down on the first step of the stairs, facing me. It was more than 10 fucking feet tall. I was paralyzed for a few seconds. That's until it started running up the stairs at me. I stumbled back into the room as fast as I could. I realized that dying at the hands of the stickman was more than just death. It stopped at the top and dipped its head through the door, taking 2 steps into the room. It was just a tall black shadow, almost more of a dense absence of light than a solid black. Realizing the axe was still in my hand, I moved between the stickman and the bathroom door. I raised the axe to attack, and at that moment, the stickman started screaming. It was unlike anything I ever heard before. I wanted to hold my hands over my ears as I felt a thunder in my brain. That's when I heard the mirror break in the bathroom from the sound. I thought about Sarah. With the last ounce of strength that I had, I ran at this thing, axe high, and I brought it down into the creature's chest, over and over again. It threw me aside, and that's when I heard my wife scream. That's the last thing I remember before I passed out. When I opened my eyes again, it was mid-morning. My wife was gone. The bathroom door was gone, and my axe was gone. I looked for Sarah all morning. I walked deep into the woods. I looked around for miles. I'm gonna go sleep for a few minutes and then go back out there. I need to find her. I hope I meet that fucking stickman, because if Sarah's dead, then I want to be dead too. I think that's what it wanted all this time. Monday, November 12th, 6 p.m. It's getting dark and harder to search the woods. In my mind, All I hear is her voice. It eats us over and over again. What did it do to her? I couldn't save her. After everything, I couldn't fucking save her. When I first realized that I had forgotten my medication, the storm stopped us from leaving. But when I saw the stick man, I thought it was a blessing in disguise. I needed to be clear-minded and alert to protect my family, and I couldn't do that when I was on the haloperidol. But it still didn't matter in the end. I couldn't save her. The car started on the first try this morning. It's letting me leave. I'm gonna go drive around to the other side of the mountain and then walk back towards the cabin. Maybe I'll find Sarah. It would be useless to stay another day. The stick man is gone. I know it. It's below freezing outside, and the furnace has burned out. The firewood is gone. If I find her, I'll come back and write in this book. Who's my only friend now. Erin had stopped playing pool long ago, and the wine hadn't been touched since I started reading. We stared at each other as the last line echoed around the cabin. We both seemed to wake up from our paralyzed state at the same time. That's when I threw the book across the room. This is fake, right? I stood up and asked. I didn't need the glass of wine anymore. At this point, I needed the whole fucking bottle. I don't think so. The guy did say he was a writer. I insisted. Maybe he just wanted to write a scary story for the people. Even though he really crossed the line into disturbing. I took a sip of wine and turned around to see Erin looking at the stairs. Erin, you can't be fucking serious. It's creepy as shit. I agree, but let's be real now. Almost like he didn't hear me. Erin started going up the stairs. I'm not sure what he wanted to see up there, but I put the wine down and followed. By the time that I got into the bedroom, Erin was sliding the glass door open. I followed him onto the balcony. You could see the tree line from the patio very clearly. I searched the woods for any movement, but I didn't see anything. I turned to say something to Erin and found him studying the roof. He threw a wild look at me and walked back inside. I followed him. Erin started pacing around the room. What is it? I was starting to get annoyed. It's all just like in the story. You can see the tree line, the field and the roof from the balcony. And look at this. He pointed to the bathroom. There's hinges but no door. There should be a door. It's a bathroom. And the mirror. What about the mirror? I said. It was shattered by the screaming of the stick man. The stick man? Did you even pay attention to what you read? There was no stick man. There never was. This last entry about the medication and how they got snowed in and couldn't go back for it. Haloperidol. It's used to treat schizo. Go read it again. The entire thing is him slowly falling to his psychosis, page by page. Hell, his wife knew it was happening. I walked into the bathroom and looked around. You think someone died in here about 4 days ago? Erin shook his head. I don't know. I think it's possible. The shower curtain is torn down. The mirror is broken. It looks like there could have been a struggle in here. And the door, the axe, they're both missing. The logic of his conclusions began to dawn on me. My God, if this is real, Erin. We ended up cleaning this place top to bottom when we got here. If there was a murder, we destroyed all the evidence. We didn't know that somebody died here. And we still don't know. Where's the body? Maybe it's buried out in the woods. We need to go get help. Let's take the book to the police and tell them what we found when we got here, just to be safe. Jesus, this guy could come back any time. Let's go. We had just started down the stairs when another thought crossed my mind. I stopped on the landing. Erin. He turned around. He said the fire in the furnace had burned out. Did you put firewood in when you lit it? No. It was almost pitch black. I couldn't see any firewood. We've been burning that furnace for almost a day. I could see the implications slowly dawning over Aaron's face. So, what is it that we've been burning? He ran for the basement door and I followed. When he opened the door, can't even describe to you what came up from below. It was a hot, pungent, heavy air. I stood on the top step as Aaron descended into the basement. The axe is down here. I took a deep breath and followed him down. I stopped on the bottom stair, refusing to go any further. It was still very dark, before the light coming down the stairs and a soft orange glow in the back of the room. Aaron knelt in front of the stove door. He looked over at me, and I nodded. Aaron slowly turned the handle and pulled open the furnace door. The fire inside, it lit his face, and after a moment, the horror that he showed told me everything that I needed to know. They had found Jason less than a month later. He had hung himself out in the woods, 50 yards from the cabin. In fact, he had been hanging there when we pulled up on Sunday, the 18th of November. I often wonder if he hung himself because he wanted to be with his wife, or if he hung himself because he realized what he had done. I hope it was the latter because I hated him so much. Not for his mental illness, not for his crime, but for what he did to us. Sarah had burned in that furnace for a day, and for a day, we inhaled every atom of her body. We were kept warm by the flesh of her body. Why didn't it smell? We were given a very scientific explanation citing high burning temperatures, years of pine infusion, and the pieces of wooden door burning in there with her. But it didn't stop the nightmares. The case did make headline news, at least locally. Aaron and I were able to prevent our names from being associated with Paradise Pine. We never told our friends or families we were involved. We try to forget everything. Paradise Pine still stands today. It's available for rent, even though the name has been changed. The owner insisted on keeping the cabin journal, so the police tore out Jason's pages and gave it back to her. It still sits on the table next to the bookshelf, and people still read it and write their own experiences. Sometimes, I wonder if people see those torn pages and wonder what was written on them and what happened to them. I guess they'll never know that the cabin that they're standing in is actually the Paradise Pine. Have you ever seen a figure in your bedroom? A shadow or something? Maybe when you're sleeping and something wakes you up in the middle of the night. You might be laying down right now. Go ahead and look around your room and tell me you don't see a shadow. If you still want to claim you haven't, maybe you should ask your sibling about something they saw growing up, or anybody who slept in the same room as you when you were younger. Growing up, we stayed in this old home. They said it was built sometime in the late 1800s, a dirt basement. I have 4 siblings, and my 2 sisters and I shared the bedroom upstairs. We never had a door, just a doorway, so we could see directly into our brother's room. Our 2 brothers' bedroom was just a big room across from ours that had the stairs leading down to the first floor, and the attic up on the wall across from them. I believe I was 5 or 6 when I had this nightmare. I felt like it was actually real. I remember waking up in the middle of the night. When I did, I thought I saw my sister standing in the vanity dresser. She was wearing a witch hat and digging around in her makeup and things. It was dark, so I could really only see the body and the hat, and I could see her arms moving around and the noise of makeup being tossed around. I was like, Amber. Then I looked in Amber's bed. which was right next to the dresser, and I saw that she was definitely there sleeping. That's when I fucking panicked, because the woman stopped moving, and she got really quiet. That's when she jumped and spun completely around, and she looked directly at me. She put her index finger to her mouth and went, shh. That's when she ran towards me. It was an old woman, an evil smirk on her face. I whipped my blanket over my head and just lay there terrified about what was going to happen next. Not exactly sure what happened, but I went back to sleep. But I remember waking up, and I told my mom in the morning. She said that I must have had a bad nightmare and to not be scared. Anyways, when I was about 17 or 18, I remember telling my brother Adam about the dream that I had. He is about 3 to 4 years older than me, so he remembers a lot more from that old house than I do. When I told him, he was like, I used to see that witch a lot, always digging in amber stuff. He used to sleep on the top bunk of the bed in his room, and it was facing our bedroom doorway. Pretty fucking scary that we all saw her growing up, but nobody ever said anything. Well, I did, but my parents never believed me. I'm just glad that it was consistent. So maybe ask your siblings or somebody who stayed in the room with you growing up if they ever saw something standing in the corner of your bedroom at night. Have you heard about never walking past mirrors at night, not whispering at night, close the windows, all of that, and don't leave any doors open when you go to bed? This is going to be a different type of story, and I would like to apologize to you first. Just hear me out until the end. That's all I ask for. My name is Andrea, and I'm a single mom. I don't tell you this like it's some badge of honor, and I'm expecting cookies, milk, and chocolate-covered snowflakes like most of the other people. They want your pats on the back and recognition. I just want some of your time if you can. I see motherhood as a burden. Necessary, yes, but it is still a burden. My son's name is Jesse. He's 11. That's 5th grade for the people who hate math. Jesse started the 5th grade this year like any other kid would. There was nervousness and lots of excitement. He was a happy-go-lucky sort of kid, full of life and energy. But everything changed after he met Stan on Tuesday. Stan was a late addition to Jesse's class, a transfer student from another district. Jesse's teacher sat Stan next to Jesse. When I picked up Jesse after school on Tuesday, he told me that Stan was his new best friend. He wasn't acting like himself though. He was pale and sweaty. I took his temp, but he wasn't running a fever. I asked about his day and all he would tell me was that Stan was his new best friend. Stan's my new best friend, Jesse would say. I know. I can't wait to meet him, I would say back. Mom, Stan is great. You should meet him. He's my new best friend, the best in the world. And we must have had the same conversation about 1,000 times that night. When I tucked Jesse in bed, he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. He put his little hand in front of his face and wiggled his index finger, telling me to come closer. I leaned over and he put his hands to either side of his mouth. You know the little kid way of telling a secret? Well, I turned my head and he whispered something into my ear that chilled me. At that time, I didn't know why, but it did. He whispered, Mom, you believe me, right? I sat back up and looked down at him. Believe you? About what, honey? Stan, he said. He's my best friend. I nodded, and I took his temp once more. Again, he wasn't running a fever. I went to bed, but I couldn't really sleep that night. On Wednesday, When I pulled up to the school to drop Jesse off, he had this really weird look on his face and told me that he didn't want to go in. Are you feeling sick? I asked. No, he said. He was chewing on his bottom lip. This was something else I never seen him do. No, I need to go to school. He opened the car door and got out. No goodbye. No, I love you. Nothing. He went up the front steps of the school with his head down. I let off the brake and turned away to drive. A little boy was standing right in front of my car. 2 more seconds and I would have run him over. The boy was pale, with a mop of blonde hair that was almost white and bright blue eyes. He knocked on the hood of my car twice, waved once, and walked up the stairs to school. When I picked Jesse up after school on Wednesday, he looked a lot better. He was still a tiny bit pale, but he seemed happy. He told me all about his day. He told me about dinosaurs and music and math. And then he told me about recess. We had recess, Mom. You'll never guess what I did today. Tell me, I said, smiling to myself as I'm driving. I'm thinking maybe tag, football, keep away. All the things that I remember the boys doing at recess when I was that age. Something normal. I joined a church, Mom, he said. I frowned at this. A church? At recess? Jesse nodded. The Church of Stan. I thought it must be some sort of new make-believe game that the kids were playing. What's the Church of Stan? I asked. It's a church. Stan's church, Mom. Jesse laughed like I was the silliest person in the world for asking that question. What do you guys do though? You know, as members? I asked. Lots of stuff. Today though, we just listened to Stan talk. He was saying some funny words and I got sleepy and dozed off. A bunch of us did. I pulled into the driveway at home and we got out. Was that it? I asked. Things really sounded weird, but the kids didn't seem to be doing anything wrong. Stan gave us flyers too, Mom. Jesse pulled out a crinkled up piece of paper and gave it to me. It was a piece of manila paper. 3 words written in black marker. Church of Stan. Again, weird, but nothing wrong. I just assumed the boys were playing make-believe, but I was wrong. When I picked Jesse up after school, I could tell that something was very wrong with him. He looked panicked and scared. What's going on, honey? I asked, reaching out to feel his forehead. No fever. We played the soul game, he said. Jesse's head was on a swivel. He couldn't sit still. He kept looking all around as we headed home. The soul game? I asked. Jesse just nodded and kept trying to look everywhere at once. Beads of sweat dotted his upper lip. What's the soul game? I asked. Jesse shook his head no and said nothing. Jesse, what's the soul game? I asked. I told him I didn't want to, but he said he wouldn't be my friend anymore if I didn't play. Who wouldn't be your friend? What about the teachers? Where were they? Jesse started breathing hard, but still answered. It happened in the church, he said. Then he whispered, the teachers are not allowed in the church. In the Church of Stan? I asked. Jesse nodded, and a tear slipped down his cheek. Jesse, what's the soul game? I'm your mom. You tell me right now, and I'll take care of everything, I said. I can't tell you, Mom. I can't. The rules are bad. They're so bad. And what about Stan? I asked. Is Stan gonna tell me? No, Jesse screamed this and scared me half to death. Don't ask him the rules. Mom, please. I pulled into the driveway, scared and confused. Mom, promise me. Jesse was crying now, terrified. I took him into my arms and rocked him. I hadn't rocked him like that since he had been in kindergarten. He fell asleep in my arms and I took him inside. I took him straight to his room and got him ready for bed. He just needs to sleep, I kept telling myself. That's all he needs. I put him to bed and ate dinner alone. I checked up on him around 9 when I went to bed. He seemed to be sleeping well, so I decided to go to sleep. I woke up to him screaming at the top of his lungs 18 minutes after midnight last night. I ran to his room, but he wasn't in his bed. I turned on the light and Jesse came flying out of the closet like something was chasing him. He latched onto my leg and kept screaming. I tried to calm him down and ask what was wrong at the same time. He wasn't making any sense. He kept screaming about the soul game. I kept asking what that was, but he wouldn't tell me. I tried to put him back to bed, but he would have none of it. Finally, I just took him to my room and he slept in my bed. Jesse fell asleep. I was lying on my side watching him, stroking his hair, when his eyes popped open and he stared right into mine. I'll tell you the rules after school tomorrow, he said. Then he closed his eyes. What was going on with Jesse? In the darkness, I stared at the ceiling for a long time before rolling over to my side and staring into the bathroom. You know how when you're on the edge of sleep, sometimes your leg will kick and jerk you awake, or you'll imagine you're falling, or maybe that you just tripped over something and got jerked awake. That happened to me all last night, only I kept waking up by seeing something in the doorway to the bathroom. Every time my eyes would start to close, I would see the dark outline of something large in the doorway and jerk awake. Of course, nothing would be there, and I would start falling asleep again. Then the outline would appear in the doorway once more, but it would be closer to me, like it had taken a baby step. This happened until morning. This morning on the way to school, Jesse seemed out of it. I felt the same way. I was even more exhausted. I thought about asking Jesse about what he had said right before he fell asleep, but I couldn't. I was afraid it would send him into a panic, so I just left it alone. We drove to school, and he didn't say a single word. He was acting like a robot. I ended up getting a phone call shortly after dropping him off to come pick him back up. He had thrown up in class. When I picked him up, he was the same. I did ask him several questions, but he only gave me grunts in response. The plan at home was to get him changed out of his dirty clothes and then take him to the doctor. He didn't say anything until we pulled into the driveway. "Mom, can Stan come over today?" he asked. He stared out the windshield at the garage door. "You're not feeling well, and do you really want him to come over?" I asked. "I want to meet this kid," but it didn't sound like Jesse wanted him over. I, however, wanted to get to the bottom of things. "Yes," Jesse said. "Alright, do you have his parents' number?" "He got permission from his parents, and they said it was fine," Jesse said. "Well, we have to wait until he's out of class, and I still want to talk to his parents." "Okay." Jesse got out of the car, and we walked into the house. "Do you have their number?" I asked as I shut the door. "No," he said. Started to ask him how I was supposed to call them if I didn't have their number. But right then, someone knocked on the door. I was standing right next to the door. I opened it, and standing in front of it was the pale little boy with the blue eyes and mop of white blonde hair that I almost ran over the other day. A little girl stood next to him with the same complexion. Yes?" I asked. "Hi, Driss," the little boy said. "Is Jesse home?" That little boy standing on my front door. Shouldn't know that name. It was my nickname from school, created on a drunken night among my girlfriends. It was short for Drissy. "No," I said. "That's fine," the little girl said. "My name is Devin, and you already know my brother's name, Stan." I said. The little girl covered her mouth and giggled. Stan smiled and shrugged. It's really quite simple. Rule number 1, don't walk past mirrors in the dark. And the second rule, don't leave any doors open when you go to bed tonight. Ask your son what rule number 3 is. And remember, a creak means that you're falling behind. A rustle means that you almost lost. When the lights go down, hopefully you won't see the dark shadow standing in the corner of the room. Hopefully you don't hear it breathing as your eyes shut and you begin to drift off. And if you hear a loud bang, well, hopefully you never hear it. Stan then turned and walked away with his sister. I stared at both of them and shook my head. I wasn't gonna play their stupid little game. I walked into the house and closed the door, and I found Jesse sitting at the table, crying. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked. "I heard a loud sound," he whispered. My mouth went dry. "And when does the game end?" I asked. "It doesn't end," he whispered. "It never ends." My heart started beating faster. "What is the third rule?" His face fell, and he sucked in a deep breath. "Rule number 3. Knowing all 3 rules makes you a player." My stomach dropped. "What happens if you lose?" "When it's dark, you'll hear them coming. They like to let you know when they're getting close." "Who?" "Stan and Devin," Jesse said. "They'll reach out through a mirror or any open doorway and drag you. It's all a game. But how do you win?" I asked. "You win if you tell more people the rules to the soul game than the person that told you does." Like I said, hear me out. I apologize, but thanks for helping. Really, I mean it. Now I'm gonna enjoy my freedom, and I hope that you enjoy your night. Give Stan and Devin my best. I'm currently smudging as I type this out. The smoke from the sage is rising around me, cleansing the air. I'm praying for myself here, and for anyone who is reading this as well. I beg you, whenever you finish this, I want you to do the same. Light your sage, cedar, say your prayers, and protect yourself. Once you understood the secrets I'm going to tell you, the spirits will know, and so will the others. Bad medicine, how much do you know about it? In your culture, it might be known as witchcraft, bad juju, voodoo, black magic, brujeria. So when I talk about it on here, it's going to be all in the same context. However, we as Dene don't talk openly about witchcraft or bad medicine, especially about the spirits. I'm not referring to curses being cast or words being spoken out. That's just the surface level of things. I'm not even supposed to write these things out. Everybody in the rest teaches you that speaking about witchcraft is to invite it into your life. When you speak of it, it listens. When you acknowledge it, it comes closer. And when it gets close, it's not gonna leave. You might see a shadow that follows you. It can be a sickness that creeps into your home, into you, or into your family. Among our people, it's not like what you might see in movies or read in books. It's something that's been twisted. Those who walk the road, those who give themselves over to the dark, become something else. They become evil, not just to themselves, but to all of those who cross their path. And I'm not specifically talking about skinwalkers. No, not at all. This is just the beginning of what goes on in their dark circles. I have a story to tell you, but before I get into that, let me explain why I'm telling you these things. I know you heard about skinwalkers, from how to become one, what they do in the graves, how they are literally the opposite of good, which you can easily look up. But there is one thing I have never heard somebody talk about when it comes to this, and that is the ceremonies these people who practice bad medicine, what these ceremonies are, and what they do. I do apologize if this offends anybody, if it feels like I'm crossing a line. Believe me, I thought about that. But some things must be said, even when it feels wrong to speak of them in my opinion. People need to know that this stuff is real. It exists, especially here on the Navajo Res. You most likely heard about them too, maybe even seen them. Stories about them keeping pace with the car before disappearing into the night. Some say they wear the skins of animals, shifting between human and beast. The stories of how you must kill a family member, someone close to you, to truly take on the power of a Skinwalker. But that doesn't really make sense when you think about it. What I actually mean is, yeah, you might have to actually kill a family member. But if that was the case, everybody would be walking around being a Skinwalker, especially with all the crimes being committed. So anyways, I consider myself one of the lucky ones. In a time when so many of our people are losing touch with their own culture, when traditional teachings are slipping away, I have my grandpa. While there's others who might forget the old ways, my grandpa made sure we never did. He ingrained in us everything we needed to know. And while I'm still young, I will forever be grateful that he passed everything he knew on to us. From the moment that I was old enough to listen, my grandpa taught me the traditional way of life. He passed down our teachings, the ceremonies, our family history, and the songs of our people. Every detail mattered to him, and he made sure it mattered to us as well. It wasn't by chance that he did this. He knew so much because he had been taught the way of good medicine. He also claimed that in his younger years, he had been on the path to becoming an official medicine man. He trained under the elders, learned the prayers, the ways to heal, and all the ceremonies as well. My grandpa always said that the power of a good medicine wasn't just about healing sickness. It was about knowing how to live in harmony with the world around you. He believed that everything had a spirit, and that it was our job to treat those spirits with respect. He introduced us to the medicine man in our community, those who would come whenever sickness would arrive, or when there was something that needed to be done. They would sing their songs, make offerings, and call upon the spirits for guidance and healing. But my grandpa's journey to becoming a medicine man was cut short. He never spoke much about why, but I remember the way his eyes would become whenever this subject would come up. He would simply say, "Something happened," and that was all. He would leave it at that. From what I was told, well, from what my father would tell me, it wasn't because he couldn't. He was on his way, respected by the elders in the community, but something changed. Something happened that he chose to step back from the calling, and he never returned to it. Even after everything, he remained a well of knowledge for the community. He carried the wisdom, but he never practiced medicine, at least not the way the leaders would. Whatever it was that made him stop, I know it stayed with him. And while he shared so much with us, there were some things he carried in silence. I know there's pride in knowing where you come from, and my grandpa made sure that we understood that. He taught us how to respect the land, how to give offerings, and how to listen to the spirits of our ancestors. He would often say, "These things, son, they are not just for us, but for those who came before us, and for those who will come after. You carry them now, and you will carry them as you walk this journey." So while there were others who lost their way, I was raised very traditional, and for that, I will always be grateful. So hopefully that gives you some background on my grandpa and the relationship that me and my family had. Growing up, my grandpa always told me stories of his family, of our ancestors, of his journey in life growing up on the res. It was his way of bonding with us, sharing the lessons of our people through the power of storytelling, you can say. I can still remember the way we would sit around the fire, or sometimes just around in the living room with him, listening as he told us everything. He talked about his life, the history of our people, However, there was always something special about the stories that he would specifically tell me, alone. Those scary stories. They were the ones that really captured my attention. But my dad, he didn't like them. He did tell my grandpa to stop telling me these things. He didn't want me hearing them. He didn't want me growing up with those images in my head. And as time went on, he did stop telling me some of these stories. However, there was one that he told me late one night. I was spending the night at his home to take care of him, and he said he wanted to tell me a story. I, of course, pulled up a chair beside him, and he started. He asked me if I really wanted to know why he stopped pursuing being a medicine man. I nodded, and he simply said, I came across a dark ceremony. He said it happened because someone in their circle of medicine man had turned to the wrong path, practicing the reversed evil ways. The people had been suspicious, but no one believed they would go this far. That's why they let their guard down. It impacted all the medicine men in training at the time. It wasn't some kind of test or lesson. Because of this, he said, he was no longer allowed to practice medicine. Even after a few decades, they allowed him. But he simply didn't want to. He told me he had been in training when one evening, it was another medicine man's turn to guide them. Someone they trusted. They were all invited to a Hogan that evening. I'll tell you exactly how he told it to me, in his own words. As we entered the Hogan, one of the chief elders stood there, facing the north side of the Hogan, not moving. There was something wrong as soon as we walked in. There was 3 of us. Something about his silence and the way he stared that made me uneasy. We took a few steps closer, and that's when we saw it. A coyote's lifeless eye stared at the hole in the north wall. My heart sank. The north wall. It meant death. It was made to release a spirit, but it also trapped something darker inside. We were standing in a death Hogan. I glanced at the elder standing beside me, confused. What are we doing here? My voice trembled in my head, but I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. We both knew we shouldn't be here. From the time that we were young, we were told to stay away from death Hogans. It was drilled into us. Never go near them, and never step inside. The elders warned us that the air in the death Hogan is thick with something you can't see, something you can't fight. Whenever someone has died inside, especially in a bad way, the spirit becomes trapped in the walls, lingering with a darkness that's not meant for the living. To enter was to invite that darkness onto yourself. The elder beside me looked around. Finally, he broke the silence. Why are we here? He said under his breath, his voice low. The elder shook his head, his jaw tight. This doesn't feel right. We're not supposed to even test things like this. The wall, it's been broken, I whisper. The elder next to me didn't respond right away, but his eyes never left that hole. He knew what it meant. I wasn't even aware at the time that this wasn't a normal ceremony. We were told it was a gathering to strengthen our bond, but I was wrong. I still thought it was part of the ceremony. The chief elder, the one that was supposed to be teaching us, walked over to the coyote that was on the ground, its body limp, and he began to gut it. I remember him whispering, saying something softly, even though I didn't understand the words. At first, I thought it was just a prayer, but something was off. He started pouring the coyote's blood into a bowl as he cut it from the anus to the throat. Very precise as he worked the hide. Not wanting to damage it, I could tell. The fire in the middle of the Hogan was burning hot. I watched him wipe sweat from his face as he continued. He then removed the eyes, the tongue, the throat, and finally, the skull and the brain. I could tell this wasn't his first time. He knew what he was doing. He fashioned the hood from the skull cap, fitting it as though it was a piece of his own skin. I know it's foolish of me to think this way, but I still wanted to think positive. Maybe This was something to honor the animal, maybe, even though a strange way to do it. He then tossed the rest of what he had taken out into the fire, and I remember him praying every time he did something. He then continued gutting the animal, removing the feet, front and back. The remaining fur was draped over his body, covering his chest and waist. He then reached into the fire, where he had placed some of the animal's body fat. He took the charred remains and mixed them into a bowl of blood, adding charcoal pieces until the mixture was thick and black. And as he did all of this, he prayed again. But I know it wasn't a prayer to the Creator. It wasn't anything that I had ever heard before. I know at this point you're wondering why we didn't get out of there. Well, the truth is, everything happened so fast. He wanted us to see what he was doing, and to be honest, I felt paralyzed. After mixing the charred fat and blood, I watched them step away from the fire. He moved over to an old blanket on the ground. As he lifted the edge of the blanket, the smell hit me. It was thick and rancid, filling the hogan with the stench of death. I froze when I saw what was underneath. A body. At first I thought it might have been someone who had died in the hogan, a spirit needing to be set free through the north wall. But no, this body didn't belong to the spirit of the hogan. This was something else. I recognized the person. A drunk man, someone who had disappeared from Gallup a few weeks ago. I know because his family sought out help as to what happened to him. This had even been brought up at our meetings to pray for the community. The body was rotting, smell hanging thick in the air. The chief elder then bent down, taking from the body what he needed: teeth, bones, and skin. His hands moved quickly, cutting and peeling, as if it was nothing to him. He then took a large piece of the dead man's fat, rubbing it across his face and body. Then, he reached back into the fire, grabbing some ashes and smearing them over himself, blackening his skin. With the bowl of blood and fat in front of him, he dipped his hand into the thick paste. Slowly, he began to draw designs on his face and chest, lines and symbols that I didn't even recognize. He then took the coyote skin next, fitting it over his head and back, tying it back with a thin string. I remember the way he looked after that. He smiled. "Perfect fit," he said, his skin blackened with ashes, the coyote's hide draped over him like a second skin. But he wasn't done. He moved over to the corner of the hogan, where he laid out a small piece of animal hide, something I couldn't recognize, but it felt wrong. There was something off about it. One by one, he started placing objects on it. A picture of a Navajo family standing in front of a silver RV, a broken piece of a whiskey bottle, strands of a woman's hair, a tooth of a snake, and bone fragments from the dead man who was there. He then placed each item carefully. But the last thing he added sent a shiver down my spine. A bullet. He reached back into the bowl of blood, scooping a handful and then splashing it across the hide and the items laid before him. The red spread everywhere, and I felt the air grow even heavier. Then, he poured more blood into a thin cup that he had, mixing in the blood of the dead man. As he did all of this, he began to whisper again. He then tied a bundle. Then, just as he finished, he said, "So tomorrow night, we'll see how tough you really are, Mr. Lawman." My stomach dropped. This wasn't just an evil ceremony being performed. It was also a curse. And whoever this Mr. Lawman was, he was marked for something terrible to come. The chief elder then moved over to the fire, tossing what was left of the coyote, its unused skin and the remaining blood and fat into the flames. I stood frozen. This wasn't supposed to happen. I had to get out of there. But before I could move, a sound from outside caught both of our attention. It was faint, but it was there. The chief elder's head snapped towards the north wall. He then whispered in a low voice, "You know it's bad to look into the north hole of a death hogan. As soon as he said this, you could hear the steps of someone running outside. I then felt a chill run down my spine. Someone had been watching us. The chief elder then said, "Whoever that was will soon be no more." That's when I was the first one to leave out of that forbidden place. I didn't know who else ran, but I know the other two also left with me. As I did, I looked back, and the chief elder just stood there, watching us go, not even moving. Whenever we ran, we all went different ways, and that was the last time I ever saw them. My grandpa then paused in his story. He then let out a small cough, barely noticeable, but there was something about the way he did it. His hand was trembling as he reached for his cup of tea. "Grandpa, are you alright? It's just this old body catching up with me, nothing more." He then set the cup down and looked at me for a long time before speaking again. "You know, ever since that night, I haven't been able to sleep the same. There's this feeling, the air from the death hole gone still lingers. I can feel it after all these years. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and it feels like I'm back at that place." "Grandpa, did you ever do anything about it? I mean, after what happened, did anyone help you?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "They tried. My elders performed the night chant ceremony for me. 9 days and 9 nights of prayer and healing. It was supposed to cleanse me, to drive out whatever darkness had clung to me after that night. And maybe it did. But there are some things that don't leave you so easy. That's the thing about bad medicine. Once it touches you, a part of it stays." He coughed again, his hand gripping the armrest of his chair for support. I wanted to ask more, but I could tell that he was starting to get tired. He then sighed deeply, rubbing his chest like the very act of breathing had become a struggle. "I'll tell you the rest tomorrow," he said. "I need to rest now. It's been a long night." I didn't push him. How could I? I didn't want to burden him further. "Alright, Grandpa," I said softly. "Get some sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." He gave me a weak smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes, you can say. He then stood up. I watched him as he walked to his room, and before he closed the door, he said, "Don't ever let the darkness touch you. Always remember what I taught you." The door then closed behind him, and that was it. The next day never came. My grandpa passed away quietly in his sleep that night. He took the rest of the story with him. Those final details he never got to share. And to this day, I'm still wondering if what he saw that night in that death hole gone finally caught up with him somehow. I'll be honest with you, curiosity is one hell of a thing. It eats at you. It calls you. It's at the back of your mind, especially when it comes to things like this. The more you're told not to look, not to listen, the more tempting it is. I would be lying if I said I never felt this way. The struggle to know, to understand these dark things. The battle between wanting to know and knowing that you shouldn't. It's always there, pulling at you from both sides. After my grandpa passed, there were moments I found myself thinking back to that night, wondering what else he had seen, what he hadn't told me. I did seek wisdom from one of the medicine men that we as a family have gone to several times. It was someone who my grandpa knew. When I told him why I was there, what I was looking for, he didn't need me to finish. He knew right away. His face changed, and the silence between us felt thick. He knew what my grandpa had passed down to me. I could see it in his eyes. He took a deep breath and finally asked, "He shared with you, didn't he? He told you what he saw?" I nodded. There was no point in hiding it. The elder sat back, rubbing his chin. "You're walking a fine line. A very fine line. The spirits, They know that you heard the story now, and they watch to see what you do with that knowledge. His words hit me hard, but there was something else. Something he said next that made my skin crawl. This is why it's important to know who you talk to, what you listen to, he said. There's dark things out there that thrive on curiosity. They draw you in, and once they grab a hold of you, there's no turning back. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unhear what you heard. And if you're not safe, they'll consume you before you even realize what's happening. I'm telling you all these things so you can learn to stay away from those evil practices. What your grandpa saw, what he experienced, it wasn't meant for him. And it's also not meant for you. Once you open that door, even just a crack, it's impossible to close it again. Part of me wanted to push further, to ask more questions, to understand what exactly happened in that death Hogan. But the other part of me knows better. He then said, evil has a way of finding those who are looking for it. You don't even need to go searching. It'll come to you. The elder stood up slowly, placing a hand on my shoulder, and told me, come back tomorrow, towards the evening. I'm going to talk to a few of the other elders and perform a ceremony so that you can be cleansed. I'll have 2 other elders with me. We'll talk more then. There are some things you need to know. 2 more? I asked. He nodded slowly. They will be here. It's better that way. There are some things that I can't explain on my own. But don't be late. It's important that we begin just as the sun starts to set. Also, bring something personal with you. Something that holds meaning. This sort of threw me off. Not the personal thing. You know how hard it is to get a medicine man to see you. Not to mention that he said tomorrow he would have 2 more with him. Either way, the ceremony has to be performed. As I was walking out, he said, remember, son, some things aren't meant to be understood, but they are meant to be dealt with. Tomorrow evening, we'll start to deal with them. And that's why I'm sharing this with you all. Learn from my grandpa's story, and learn from me. Don't let curiosity lead you down a path you can't come back from. Because the truth is, some doors are better left closed. And once you start seeking, the darkness will know, and it won't let you walk away. Samantha, she told me about it on our 3rd date. We were watching a movie on her couch when I made a move to kiss her. She whipped her hand in front of my face and blocked me.
There's something you need to know,
she said. I braced myself. Here it comes. The whole speech about I'm not ready for a relationship. It was the last thing that I wanted to hear, especially because I was already crazy about her.
I have a removable face.
That's a new one. You have a what now? I was about to laugh, but she was wearing a deadly serious expression.
I have a removable face.
Is that like a metaphor or something?
No, my face is literally removable. Look closely. You can see the seam.
She lifted her chin and traced her jawline with a finger. After admiring how beautiful her neck was for a moment, I leaned in for an inspection. It was very hard to see, but it did look like there was a slightly unnatural transition there from her face to her throat. I grew dizzier as a dozen questions rushed into my brain.
Don't bother asking why or how or anything like that,
said Samantha.
I can't tell you that. If that's going to be a problem, you should leave now. I'm letting you know this because I like you and I want to take the next step. But this is non-negotiable.
Okay, I said, unsure of what was happening. Not a problem. So what? You have a removable face. Who cares? It looks good.
There's something else. Once a day, usually in the evening, I have to remove the face and disinfect the inside of it. If I don't, it will rot. This takes about an hour, give or take, depending on how my day went. During this time, you must never, ever look at my real face. Never. Do you understand?
Yes, got it. Don't ask about it. Don't look at your real face. Samantha stood up.
Now, I'm going to go into the bathroom and clean my face. That will give you plenty of time to think about what I've told you. If you're here when I'm done, that's great. I would like that. But if you're gone, I'll understand.
She turned and walked into her bedroom. I sat in stunned silence as I heard the bathroom door close. I gave the last thing some serious thought. It was possible that it was a joke of some kind. Was it possible that it was true? Well, it was possible to transform an actor's face with movie makeup, so I suppose it was possible that Samantha was wearing a removable face every day. Maybe she had a horrible accident where her flesh had been mangled. Maybe her face had been melted by acid, or burned by fire, or the skin shorn off by heavy machinery. If it had, I would never know, because she would never tell me, and I would never see it. A picture of a face of raw, naked muscle, rotting away. Could I kiss her? Is that what I was kissing? But wasn't that what we all were, under the skin? Just muscle and bone and blood and squishy organs. I paced around the living room, running my hand through my hair. I liked Samantha a lot. She was smart and funny, and beautiful. But was that beauty real? Did it count? Did it matter if it was real or not? Was I being superficial, even worrying about it? When she came out of the bathroom, I was still there. I looked at her face. She smiled, and I was in love. We dated and we moved in together, and we decided to get married. For the most part, it was a completely normal relationship, typical of two young people in love, building a life together. During the day, it was easy to forget about the face altogether. It looked natural enough, and only in certain positions, in certain lights was there ever any indication that it wasn't natural. But every night was the same. Samantha would close herself in the bathroom, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 2, and clean the inside of her face. The curiosity never left me. I would sit there and wonder what was underneath that face. I came so close to barging in on her a few times, but I never did. I did occasionally ask her about it, about what, if anything, had happened, about how it was possible to make the face look so real, about what it really looked like underneath. I tried to get her into showing me, assuring her that I loved her no matter what, and didn't give a damn what her real face looked like. I was just curious, that's all. But she never showed me, or told me the story behind it. She didn't get upset at me, unless I was really badgering her. She would just shrug and say,
You know you can't see it. You know I can't tell you about it.
I never told anybody about Samantha's face. It's not that she asked me not to. I just didn't think it was anybody's business. Except once, I did tell somebody about it. It was during my pre-wedding party, the groom's party. We had rented several cabins and spent the night drinking and packing our noses with powders that we shouldn't have been packing our noses with. Everyone else had passed out, and the sun was creeping up behind us as I stood on the majestic cliffs with my friend Chris, looking down on the waves crashing against the rocks. Chris was my best friend, as close to a brother as I had known. We'd grown up together, and we visit each other at college very often, and we spent the summers together as well. After college, we moved to different cities, but we stayed in close contact. Standing there on the cliff, I told Chris about Samantha's face. At first, he thought I was joking. Then came 1,000 questions, both of which I couldn't answer. What's underneath? I'm not sure. Doesn't that drive you crazy? Not knowing? I shrugged. There's a lot of things I don't know. I don't know how to do calculus. And I also don't know what happens when we die. But dude, she's about to be your wife, and you don't even know what she looks like. I mean, I have to take a look. Like, could you set a camera up in the bathroom? That's where she does it, right? Set up a camera and have a look, and then you'll know. I sighed. Yeah, it does drive me crazy. I have asked her 1,000,000 times, but she told me I could never look, that gotta respect that, man. Even if I don't like it. That's love. Chris laughed. You telling me to respect a woman? Up is down now. Then we fell back into talking about old times as a new day dawned. Chris was in town for business last week, and he planned on spending the weekend at our house. The conversation we had at the cliff happened 4 years ago, and we hadn't spoken about Samantha's face since then, despite keeping in close contact and seeing each other as often as two people transforming into adults in different parts of the country can. It happened on Saturday evening. We were lounging in the backyard, deep into the beer, having just finished with some grilled steaks when I got a text message from work. I gotta make a work call,
Seriously?
said Samantha, raising an artificial eyebrow.
On a Saturday night?
It's my biggest client, babe. Sorry.
It is what it is, I guess. I'm going to head inside and get cleaned up. Chris, are you okay just hanging out for a bit?
I'll be fine. Got my beer, got some weeds to pull in your garden. God knows your lazy ass husband isn't gonna do it. The tomatoes are choking to death. It's a tragedy. I rolled my eyes and went into the side yard to make my phone call. 15 minutes into it, I heard the screams coming from inside. Both my best friend and my wife were screaming. I dropped the phone and ran into the house and down the hall to our bedroom. Through the open door, I could see that the door to the master bathroom was also standing open.
Don't come in!
Screamed Samantha.
I don't have my face on. Call an ambulance. Oh God, he looked.
She sounded desperate and truly horrified. That made me desperate and horrified as well. And I wanted to rush into the bathroom, but I knew right away that it would be a mistake. I knew suddenly that Samantha didn't want me to look at her real face, not out of a sense of vanity, but for my own safety. Chris started staggering backwards out of the bathroom. He was holding out a paper clip, which he had used to pick the privacy lock. Now he was stabbing it, again and again, into his eyes, shouting gibberish. He was clearly in the depths of madness, and it turned my stomach to see him mutilate himself.
Call a fucking ambulance.
My wife screamed.
Don't come in here. He fucking looked.
I turned and ran back to the side yard, where my phone was lying in the newly mowed grass. My client was still on the line, alarmed, asking what was happening, what all the screaming was. I hanged up on him and called 911. When the paramedics got there, Chris was having a seizure in the hallway. Samantha was stroking his head, sobbing. Her face was on, but it had been done pretty quickly, and everything looked a little bit off. My world has been dark this past week. My best friend is in a hospital under suicide watch. He's completely blind, and mostly catatonic except when he slips into a violent babbling mania. The doctors are optimistic that his state is temporary, but they don't know the truth about what caused it, because I told the paramedics that Chris had taken a large dose of mushrooms and fallen into psychosis. I saw no good reason to tell the truth about what happened. Who would believe that somebody looked at my wife's real face? That it would make somebody insane. At best, we would be the subjects of a long investigation. We would have to prove that what we were saying was true by showing somebody Samantha's face. Then the same thing would happen again. And what about after that? I had no idea and no interest in finding out. For Samantha's part, I knew that she would never consent to show anybody her real face, no matter what consequences she would face if she refused to. I did get a follow-up call from the police, asking me to confirm my story. The hospital found no traces of drugs in Chris's blood. If they end up testing his hair, I will likely be in a lot of trouble. But that's the least of my concern. Samantha is in a state of her own. She still cleans the inside of her face, though not as normally as she used to. And when she puts it back on, it's always a little bit different, and it's beginning to smell a little bit weird. I tried to assure her that it wasn't her fault. He knew, I said. I told him that nobody was ever allowed to look at it. He knew, and then he broke into the bathroom. This is not on you, babe. Please, talk to me.
Not on me? That one look at my fucking face makes people insane?
I'm doing my best to hold it all together. Do you know what's strange about this? Despite what happened to Chris, I still find myself curious about what my wife's real face looks like. More curious than ever, really. I have something to share. Not exactly sure what happened. I don't have an explanation that fits everything, but maybe some of you might know more about what happened. After thinking about it for a while, I can't shake the feeling that it might have something to do with native folklore or something supernatural, especially given the area that we were in. The Black Hills and Badlands have deep cultural and native history, and what my friend and I experienced there was far from normal. I'll just tell you what happened, and maybe you'll have your own thoughts about what it could have been. We got an Airbnb, and the first night there, my friend was starting to get a little bit sick, possibly a cold, so she went to bed much earlier than me. On the trip to South Dakota, we talked about random weird stuff, as two best friends do on a long road trip. One of these things was how strict we are about closing the lid of the toilet before we flush. We're both big germaphobes, so closing the lid before we flush is a habit we both had for a long time. It's a weird fact, but it's relevant. She's asleep by the time that I finish my dinner and shower, and like any God-fearing American, I use the bathroom before I get in the shower. After I get out, I go check on her because I'm a little worried about how she's feeling. She's absolutely crashed in her room, and I can see her breathing and also hear her snore. After I check on her, I decided to try to go to sleep. The Airbnb is a pretty small trailer. The host is rated as a super host. No strange or negative reviews. My friend's room is on one side of the trailer, then the common area with the entrance that opens directly into the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen. The door to my room is right next to the kitchen drawers and sink. My friend sleeps with her door open, and I sleep with my door closed. I fall asleep quickly, but after a few hours I wake up because I can hear what sounds like drawers rolling on their tracks right outside my door. Now, my friend has been known to sleepwalk, so I think that's what it is. I'm wondering what to do when I realize that I really need to use the bathroom. I'm not mentally ready to go out and see my friend sleepwalking. Honestly, it's always freaked me out a bit, even though I know she can't help it. I open the door, and there's no one there. No drawers are open. Nothing looks out of place. And it wasn't a matter of minutes passing since I heard it. It had been seconds. Even if my friend had ran back to her room on the other side, I would have definitely noticed. I'm trying to rationalize everything as I make my way to the bathroom. Like maybe some animal was doing some weird stuff under the trailer, and it just so happened to sound like drawers. However, when I get to the toilet, something is off, and it takes me a split second to realize what it is. The toilet lid is not only up, but there is pee in the bowl. So I text her and say, I'm trying to just chalk all this up to you sleepwalking, and I tell her what all has happened. After I finish my business, I go to check on her again, but it seems like she hasn't moved an inch, hasn't even rolled over, not even pulled the covers up. I'm just like, what the fuck? But I'm determined to enjoy my trip, so I go back to my room, lay down, and try to go back to sleep. Any sleep I got was super light, and I wake up a lot, but I don't hear anything else. My friend woke up at 4:30 to officially use the bathroom, saw my text, and just kinda said, maybe. And we left it at that for the day. Neither one of us wanted to talk about it, so when we wake up, we head out early for breakfast for a full day of hiking in the Badlands, and it was honestly amazing. Beautiful scenery, a bunch of great hikes, and we saw a ton of wildlife. The events of the night were put out of my head. Even when we got back to the Airbnb, I was most likely just scaring myself because I'm in a new place far from home. We then eat dinner, take our showers, lay down, and I fall asleep pretty quickly as I'm exhausted from the day. But this night, around 2 or 3, I think, I wake up because there's a steady scratching on the wall outside my room. I know it had been going on for some time because it had worked itself into my dream, and I was having a nightmare about some monster coming after me. The details about the nightmare aren't really clear, but I remember the fear I felt when I woke up to that noise. I know some people would say, it's just scratching, it's not a big deal, but it sparked some kind of primal fear in me. I texted my friend, and I asked her if she could hear it. As soon as I texted her, the noise just stopped. No taper off or anything. It just suddenly stopped. She texted back a few hours later and said she didn't hear anything, but that if I was scared I could come sleep with her. She also offered up the idea of it possibly being a wild animal, being attracted to the smell of the food we had been cooking. I just held on to that idea and let it be. The beds weren't very big, so I decided to stay in my own room, now that I had a semi-logical explanation. The thing is, the trailer was lifted, and the place on the wall that was being scraped up was high up. Again, I pushed any further thoughts out of my mind and tried to go back to sleep. We have one more day of hiking in the Black Hills, then one more night, then we'll head back home. The Black Hills are beautiful, one of my favorite parts of the trip, but this whole time I'm terrified of getting separated from my friend for some reason, even though it's daylight and we're on very popular trails. So that was weird, the feeling that I had. We do our hikes there, then head back to our Airbnb for our final night. At this point, I would like to add that as two young females, we try to be as safe as possible, sharing our locations with a few friends and family members. She has a gun and she is licensed to carry. I have some pepper spray that I keep on me at all times. We move stuff in front of the door to block the entrance in case a creeper was trying to break in. And of course, we keep the doors and windows locked. We did check the windows as soon as we got there the first night. We checked under the beds every night. Again, it's a small trailer, and not a lot of hiding spots for creepers that we wouldn't think to look. We had agreed to leave about 7 in the morning to head back home. However, about 5 a.m., a few things start to happen. The scratching noise wakes me up again. It had been going on for so long that it worked its way into my dream again. I was dreaming that a big cat was stalking us while we were trapped in the wilderness. When I woke up and grabbed my phone to text my friend, it immediately stopped. I see that my friend had texted me. She was asking, "Did you hear it?" I think she finally heard the scratching, so I text back and say, "Yes, I did." I walk into the living room where she is, and I see that she's so freaked out that she has her gun out. She's been through courses. She knows not to draw your weapon unless there's clear danger and you're ready to shoot. But she was scared, and she doesn't scare so easily. I asked her what's going on, and she said, "I woke up because I heard a low noise. Then I heard shuffling and footsteps in the kitchen. I sat up in bed, and I realized that my door had been shut. That's when I texted you and grabbed the gun." So a couple of things. She slept with her door completely open every night. The heater kicking on never closed it. She wasn't tall enough to kick it shut. Even nudging it with her finger wasn't forceful enough to shut it all the way. It had to be pulled shut. Also, we would have heard someone coming in through one of the windows or the door. Everything was locked tight. We checked every night before bed. Also, the morning before, I had walked around the trailer, looking for signs of damage where the scratching was. There was none. I was also looking for a loose spot where an animal could have gotten under the trailer, to make the noises that we were hearing in the kitchen, but there was nothing. My friend asked me what I wanted to do. The sun wasn't going to be up for a little bit, but at that point I'm pissed. I actually haven't had a good night's sleep in several days. I then say, "Let's get everything and go. Keep your gun out and ready. We don't have a lot, so it's not going to take a long time to get it all in the car." So that's what we do, and we get the fuck out of there. Also, 3 nights there, and we didn't see the moon a single time. I say this because that's what I wanted to do. We even looked it up on Google, and it was supposed to be right around 1/4 to 1/2, so it definitely should have been visible. We could see all the stars, and it wasn't overcast at night. We kept saying on how everything was so weird. That morning as we were leaving, the moon was there, so bright. Like, this might be stupid, but I'm not sure if it just rises up later in South Dakota. But sometimes we would get back to the Airbnb kind of late. It was just weird. We did message the Airbnb host twice about it. She was one of those that was labeled as super responsive and replies within an hour, but she refused to respond to our messages with any kind of explanation. We ended up offering our own, a wild animal of some kind, but she didn't even say anything about that. However, I don't believe it was an animal at this point. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't that. After we put many hours between us and there, and the sun came up, that's when my friend finally said, I wanted to tell you what I already saw that first night in the park, at the Pinnacle's Outlook, and proceeded to tell me about the humanoid figure. She also said that she didn't feel like she had been sleepwalking at all while we were even there. And before I wrap it up, there's a few things I want to say. I checked the Airbnb site several times since then. All great reviews. No mention of anything similar to what we experienced. We did end up leaving a 3-star review. We tried to put what happened to us the best we could. Again, chalking it up to an animal. The host did leave us a great review, while still never responding to our questions. Another thing, I went to another hiking trip with my husband about a month and a half later. I heard scratching on this trip as well, but this time I was able to say, that's a squirrel, or something similar. And it did not bring about that sense of absolute primal fear, and the feeling of being hunted, even while you were laying in bed when you're supposed to be safe. When I was walking around checking the siding for damage after the scratching, I checked the sheet metal that lined the bottom for loose sections, and I didn't find anything. I also looked for somewhere an animal could have fit through, but there was nothing. The history of the land is also pretty strange, and I believe that the land holds on to stuff like that. The Native Americans literally named it Evil Lands. And I was like, well, they wouldn't have done that for no reason. I have seen that some of the younger natives in the area said that their older relatives wouldn't let them go near the area, which I actually didn't know before planning the trip. My friend asked if I would ever go back, and I said most likely not. It was beautiful, but I feel like whatever that thing was let me off with a warning this time. And if I go back, I feel like something will definitely happen. A lot of people were asking how come my friend just decided to keep the sighting of the humanoid figure to herself at first. Well, she did, but she's very logical, and she'll try her best to rationalize things, like myself. I also think she didn't want to scare either of us so bad that it made looking back on this trip more like a scary experience, even though now that's how I see it. But still, I think the less that we talk about it, the less that we acknowledge it, the better it is, because I believe these things feed on fear. We were already scared, but I know talking about it would have escalated the fear much more. If anybody has an explanation for this, let me know. So I was 20 years old and still living with my parents because I was poor, which meant that I had to travel with them and go with them everywhere. We figured it was time to visit some family in the very southern part of the world, called Tennessee. This area was backwoods, pretty wild. These people are very traditional. They do a lot of things we would consider weird, but a family get-together means we all have to hang out. Now, they are decent people once you get to know them. Somehow, I ended up with 3 cousins and a friend from out of town. I'll call them Eddie, Garrett, Austin, and Trent. These are the names of some people I'm related to, but they're not the actual names of the people I'm referring to. Does that make sense? Sorry about this. I'm not really great at making up names. So anywho, we snuck off with 2 6-packs that my grandpa left out. He's a very good man, but he's, how should I say it? He leaves everything, everywhere. So me, Garrett, Austin, and Trent decide that we're gonna go drink somewhere away from the property so nobody will see us. We end up wandering out into the woods. We find a clearing about 30 minutes away, I'm not really sure at this point. Adrenaline kills my sense of time, and we were just talking on the way there. Garrett, the cousin from these parts, seemed really nervous as we kept walking. He's older than us, but he kept complaining about how we shouldn't be doing this, that it's wrong. The rest of us kept telling him to stop being a bitch and have some fun for once. Now I gotta mention, like I said, we do things differently down here. So Garrett was always carrying an old rifle, like from the old days when they hunted for a living. So we lit up a small lamp and sat there in a circle just talking to one another. This whole time Garrett is quiet, and we start getting a little tipsy, not really drunk, just having a few beers. I had half a can and called it good. I still don't really have a taste for alcohol, I guess. Garrett then suddenly said, "We shouldn't be here." I was thinking, well, we just stole beer from our head grandpa. Of course we shouldn't be out here. He then said again, "You don't understand. We really shouldn't be here. We should go." At this point, everyone is sort of annoyed with Garrett because he's just saying that we shouldn't be out here. Fine, we'll go in just a few minutes. Let's just finish these last few beers. Not even a minute passes when suddenly it got really cold. "We really shouldn't be here, guys. We have to leave," Garrett said again. At this point, Austin laughed, and then Trent mumbled something under his breath. The lamp that we brought flickered as a bug bumped into it. A big-ass bug at that. Garrett, now looking super pissed off, got up and walked over to Austin and basically stood him up like a good little soldier. "We're leaving, right now." Austin then stopped laughing and said, "Chill, let's get out of here because this dude is a party pooper." We all got up and Garrett continued staring where Austin had been sitting at. That's when he said, "We are leaving." Except, he wasn't telling us no more. He wasn't even looking at us. He was staring into the tree line. Trent and I were trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Suddenly, Garrett picked up his gun and aimed it towards Trent. Trent got scared. You could see it all over his face. He said, "Garrett, what the fuck are you doing, man?" "We're leaving right now, ain't we, fellas?" Garrett said. And that's when we noticed that Garrett kept aiming towards the trees. Trent then slowly turned around out of curiosity to see if something was behind him, or figure out what the heck was going on. The trees were dark and you couldn't see anything beyond the clearing. The only source of light out there was that lamp that we had brought. But when Trent turned around, I swear he saw something because of his reaction. His eyes became big. I was too much of a chicken to see what was going on. But that's when Trent suddenly just took off running past Garrett, who kept aiming his gun at whatever was back there. "Don't move until I tell you, but when I say it, run like a fox in a hen house," Garrett said. At this point I was too scared to try and say anything myself, so I just nodded my head. I turned my head to try and sneak a peek to see what Trent saw. "Don't move," Garrett quietly said. He then picked up the lamp by hooking it with the muzzle. "We're leaving right now. We don't want any trouble. We didn't mean anything by it," Garrett kept saying. And that's when I heard something moving in the bushes. Garrett stopped breathing for a moment, and the lamp swung gently. I'm not a fast man, but I know that night I was Usain Bolt. Austin was like 5 feet from me. I could hear him crying. At this point I was crying too. I heard 3 gunshots, one every few seconds, and then a scream. As I'm telling the story, I'm actually crying again. This isn't a joke, but it feels better to write everything down instead of storing it all up. Random, I know, but that's just how I cope with the situation. Anyways, have you ever heard a coyote yelp? They sound like young kids, crying and yelling. I grew up with coyotes in my backyard. This was definitely not one of them. It was high pitched, higher than a coyote, and it was right behind us. Austin and I didn't even look at each other. We just kept running. We finally cleared the trees and entered some meadows near a creek. Garrett appeared behind us, rifle slung over his shoulder, shouting, "Keep running! Don't look back!" The scream was getting louder, but not in volume. It was getting closer. Garrett told us to keep going, and that we were almost across the line. He then stopped and took another shot before moving again. I was thinking, this is how I'm gonna die. Suddenly, there's more screams. We then saw an old fence, not more than 30 yards away. Austin leaped over it like he was in track, perfectly in sync and landing. Adrenaline does make you do some crazy things, so I also jumped over it. However, I landed on my back and saw stars. Gary leaped over and took aim again, completely out of breath. "We're on our side. Fuck off." That's when the screaming literally just stopped. There were no crickets or anything to fill the void left by it. Just three men crying and panicking. Austin was on his knees. I'm pretty sure he had just thrown up. I wasn't even there mentally anymore. "Garrett, where's the lamp?" Garrett kept his gun up, but his knees were shaking. He whispered, "Back in the trees." We all looked up and saw the tree line. Sure enough, the lamp was sitting in the trees. Something was standing near the trees, but it was way too tall. It didn't really move. It was just jittering back and forth, like someone had cut out the in-between frames of something that was animated. It moved back and forth across the trees. The light blocked out the details, which was perfectly fine by me. It turned and sort of moved across the ground. Its knees were backwards. Holy shit. Garrett was heaving now. His breath was ragged, but he seemed okay. "Garrett, what the hell's going on?" He then just said, "Shut the fuck up." That's when I saw another one appear from the woods and started to jitter. Garrett aimed and shot again. My ears rang for a second. These things, or whatever they were, rushed back and forth across the tree lines, falling in and out of the light. For a second, I thought I saw three shapes moving around, but I didn't care. I just wanted all of this to stop. The light in the trees flickered, and Garrett said, "When the light goes out, run as fast as you can, and scream as loud as you can for Grandpa. Don't stop, even if I tell you to. Even if anybody tells you anything, don't stop." Austin didn't even argue. I nodded, turning to stare at the trees. The light flickered again, but it came back. The shapes stopped moving. They got closer, bigger, something. I'm not sure at this point. The light flickered again. I expected them to get bigger again, but this time, the light didn't come back on, and that's when we booked it. Austin took the lead, rushing into the forest behind us, screaming for Grandpa. Garrett didn't even hold the rifle for a shot anymore. He was just running like we were. We heard the screams again, but they were getting closer. Suddenly, lights everywhere. The screams stopped. Grandpa was about 50 yards away with my dad, three distant uncles, and some other guy in a sweatshirt. They all had guns, and I was thinking, what the fuck is going on here? Garrett and Austin slid into the ground in front of Grandpa. At this point, I didn't care. I crashed into my dad, who hugged me for a second as I kept crying. Garrett was saying a bunch of things, but he was speaking so fast that I couldn't understand him anymore. Grandpa and one of the uncles just nodded. "Where's your friend?" "Trent ran ahead of us and passed us. Didn't he get to you?" Grandpa grabbed me and Garrett. Austin was curled up, weeping on the ground. "Take him to the house. Hide him in the guest room with no windows. They have seen what he looks like." At this point, I just wanted to go home, or anywhere that counted as home, just away from this. However, Grandpa said that I needed to go with them. "Garrett has a good gun," he said, "but now, since you want to act all tough and go into places and doing things you ain't supposed to be doing, you will be coming with us as well." And so that's how I ended up going back through the woods again. And I have to admit, I was still scared, but I felt a lot safer with all the guns and the rest of the people. The guy in the sweatshirt whispered something to Grandpa. My dad kept marching, his hand on my shoulder. Garrett then started calling out for Trent. "Start calling out to him," he told me. We then kept calling out, and that's when the guy in the sweatshirt whispered something to Grandpa again. We reached the fence, the exact same spot, vomit still on the ground where Austin had been. Grandpa then waved the flashlight around, illuminating the meadows. My uncles were doing the same. Suddenly, a shape darted under the tree line, crying and huffing. It was Trent. He stopped a few feet from the fence and fell to his knees, crying like me. Grandpa and the uncles were totally quiet. Garrett and I didn't move. I thought I lost you guys back there at the campsite. I was scared because nobody was saying anything. Garrett then spoke first. Where did you go, Trent? I got lost ahead of you. I got turned around, I guess. Grandpa leaned in and whispered something to the other guy's ear. He nodded. My dad then tightened his grip on my shoulder. Trent then said confused, Aren't you guys gonna help? Grandpa moved in with his gun a bit. Help? With what? Help me get over the fence. The fence is tall, and I'm tired. Grandpa and my uncle slowly lifted their guns, aimed it at Trent. What do you mean? You look fine. Funny guys. Seriously, let me in. Grandpa was now more serious. I had never felt so scared of a person before in my life. Trent looked very nervous, and he kept looking back to the tree line. I felt like something was off, but I was too scared and stupid to figure out what it was. Help me over the fence, guys, Trent said again. The guy in the sweatshirt then spoke up. Come on over then, kid. Trent then stopped and stared at him in an evil way and said, Not you. You came. It's not your land. Grandpa then raised his gun again. My dad tightened his grip on my shoulder. You're not invited. This is our side. He's a friend of the family. He's not the owner. Trent was still on his knees, but the way he was looking, it felt like he was ready to do something. You know that feeling you get when you have wanted something? Well, this felt the opposite. I felt like we were in a situation we weren't supposed to be in. At that moment, I realized what was so weird about Trent. He wasn't breathing. Trent was now staring daggers at Grandpa. The uncles pointed their guns at him. The other guy just held a flashlight on Trent's face. My dad then whispered something in my ear along the lines of, Trent, we'll be fine. Grandpa then shot the gun off into the air, just like Garrett had done, and then waited for the shot to stop ringing out. Grandpa and my uncle slowly started to back away. Garrett and my dad guided me back. The guy in the sweatshirt kept the flashlight on Trent and moved in time with Grandpa. One of my uncles stayed behind, nodded to Grandpa, and kept pointing the gun at Trent. We slowly backed away. The guy in the sweatshirt was moving with us. I shouldn't look, but I turned around and looked anyway. The light was still pointed at Trent, but he was moving towards the tree line, like he was a puppet being dragged back. At this point I wanted to scream, but it was caught in my throat. My father grabbed my head and turned it. The scream started again, but they were distant now. Garrett looked over his shoulder, but Grandpa kept walking. We made it to the house. I went inside, and I heard Austin crying from one of the rooms. Dad took me inside, led me to bed, and he basically tucked me in for the first time since I was 10. The terrified kid inside of me didn't care. I spent the rest of the night staring at the wall, before falling asleep to the sound of gunshots and distant screams. The next day, I woke up to find Grandpa sitting at the table with most of my extended family, smoking and reading. Garrett was playing with some of the younger cousins. Austin was watching TV. My dad handed me some eggs and toast, smiling at me like nothing happened. Garrett saw me, smiled and motioned me over. Trent went home this morning. He's alright. Nobody's okay. Who said we're fine? What happened? Garrett then gave me a look and quietly stated, As a matter of fact, last night didn't happen. Trent is okay. Drop it. I did find out later that Trent did indeed make it home. He was found by some neighbors down the road. He apparently woke up in the brush and just ran home. He was convinced he got drunk or something and was hung over, which explained all the bruises he had on his back and neck. I only asked my grandpa what happened once. He said he had trouble with people on the nearby land, that they kept trying to get into his property. I then asked why they hadn't taken him. He looked at me right into my eyes and said, I haven't invited them in. That's why. He wouldn't answer anything else after that. He just said, not a problem, to everything. It's been about 3 years. I had various visits to my family that ended with something similar going on. but nothing has ever come close to how scared I felt that night. Part of me wants to look up and see what those things were. Another part of me desperately repressing that urge. And my curiosity wants me to go look and investigate what those things were. However, I would say it's the closest thing I ever had to a Skinwalker incident. But to this day, I can't figure out exactly what those things were. I just dropped out of college and I really needed a job. Otherwise, my parents were gonna kick me out. I live in the middle of nowhere, high up north, so I couldn't just apply to a McDonald's or something. My dad did ask any of his friends if they had work or know someone who does. One dude who lives even further away from any civilization says that he knows a guy who could use some help. The guy owns all sorts of cattle, from cows to domesticated deer, you name it. It's the middle of the summer, so all of his animals are out in the fields around a mountain that he owns land on. It's a pretty normal practice for farmers here. They fence up massive areas and basically just let their livestock roam free. They'll check up on them every day, or hire someone to look after them on the spot. Apparently, this year he underestimated his workload and spread his livestock out far too much. That's where I would come in. I would have to live in this little cabin in the middle of nowhere and check up on the surrounding animals every day. Fix some broken things and clean up the pathways leading through the woods. The cabin was about 3 hours away from the nearest village, 6 hours by foot. Food will be brought to me every week on a Friday, and I was free to do as I pleased when done with my work. The pay wasn't half bad too, and I was only going to be there for like 3 months. At least that's what I thought. So I met up with the guy. It's a younger guy, like in his 30s. He seemed kind of on edge, but he was pretty chill. I figured that he was just stressed out. He gave me some details about the job, like how the electricity in the cabin worked. It was solar. He mentioned how there was a lot of wildlife, and how I shouldn't get scared when I hear weird noises in the distance. And even then, aside from the occasional wolf being in the area, there wasn't too much to be afraid of. Bears hadn't been sighted in years, and there wasn't any cycled deer. So basically, I would just get paid to relax in a nice cabin in the middle of nowhere, while doing some minimal work. It sounded too good to be true. I took the job regardless, as I didn't really have too much of a choice. I start the next week, and get picked up by the guy, who is now my boss. I drive up some sketchy mountain roads through the forest. The scenery is beautiful though, completely untouched nature, birds chirping everywhere, comfortable temperature, everything feels good. We get to the end of the road, and then we need to hike up 30 more minutes just to get to the cabin. Nothing seems or really feels out of place. It literally just feels like I'm on vacay over the next 3 months. I grab my backpack and follow my boss up the path. Eventually, we get to the cabin. It's about 6,500 feet above sea level. There's a beautiful view of the valley that we just drove through. The cabin is in the middle of a small clearing, and even has a creek next to it for fresh drinking water. My boss then shows me how to use everything from the fire stove to the water heater. I won't bore you with all those details. The cabin is solar powered, so I have to watch the battery. I didn't plan on using that much tech anyway, so I wasn't too worried about it. However, it's important to note that for later. He says that if anything happens, I should give him a call, that it doesn't matter what time it is. And he puts a lot of emphasis on the last part. My phone actually has signal out here. Not much, but enough to make a phone call. He then explains one more time what I have to do, and he hands me a map with all the pathways I should check. This also includes specifically marked areas where the cows that I'm supposed to look after are often found to graze. Just before he leaves, he tells me that he'll be on the other side of the mountain, looking after some things or something. He wishes me a pleasant stay and takes off. So I'm finally alone, and I don't have much to do the first day. It's past noon, so I just set up my sleeping stuff, put all of my food in the cupboards, and of course I take care of myself. Nothing much happened for the first few days. I simply repaired holes in fences, cleaned up some stuff like branches and rocks off the hiking paths, and looked around grazing spots to see how the cows were doing. After some time, the third week rolls around. Nothing special had happened up until this point. I was on my routine checkup of one of the hiking paths. That's when I found a dead deer. It was in a pretty uncomfortable part of the woods I could never really put my finger on, and even at that time, the place just kind of felt weird. It was usually covered in shadow, since a nearby mountain would block sunlight. Of course, the one dead deer I would find was specifically here. The deer didn't seem to have been killed by anything or anyone. There was no flesh wounds, there was no blood, and there was nothing broken. However, its neck was kind of weird. It wasn't broken, but it looked kind of long. Again, I'm pretty sure that it wasn't broken, but it was just unnaturally long. I didn't take a picture of it. You would always see dead animals out here, especially in the winter, so it wasn't all that special. A couple of days go by without anything special, and then the howling starts at night. Now, for those who don't know, whenever it's mating season, the stags roar to attract females. Look it up on YouTube if you want to know what it sounds like, but it's insanely loud, and from a distance, it can sound scary, as sometimes it'll sound distorted, especially out here if it echoes. The mating season here is in late August to September, and this is early July, so it sounded really loud. Also, sometimes the wind sounds kind of weird, almost like a tad bit vocal. It's hard to explain, really. It was windy a few times, and it didn't really sound anything like it, so I thought nothing of it. I mentioned it to my boss that Friday when he delivers me my food for the week. He says it's normal to hear those things out there. It can be just the wind blowing through the trees or various animals. He does mention the fact that there is a hunting rifle left behind by some hunters for hunting season in one of the cupboards. Kinda weird how he never told me that before, and is only telling me now after I mentioned the noises that I heard, and I noticed that the boss seems on edge again. He looks from right to left a lot, from one end of the clearing to the other. I ask him if he's okay, and he just says that he's just a bit exhausted from carrying all the supplies up the mountain. Some more time passes, and it's week 5. I'm doing my daily routine where I can still hear the howling off in the distance. It still occurs every once in a while. However, it just happens at night. I'm not too bothered by it. After all, there's a lot of wildlife around, any of which could make a sound like that. Or it could just be the echo plus the wind, and then some kind of distortion going on. However, I end up finding more dead animals. It's usually small birds and foxes, but I do find another deer. All of them without any sort of visible wound or blood or anything, but all of them look like they have some body part that was just off looking in some way. Their necks, their legs, their skulls seeming just a bit too long. Again, I can't really put my finger on what was wrong with them, but it feels like something really off about them. It's almost like someone opened up Microsoft Paint, pasted a picture in it, and slightly stretched out a body part, enough to be noticeable, but too little to really stand out if you're not looking for it. So this goes on for some time, until week 8. At this point, I only have a couple of more weeks left to go. My boss still seems on edge every time that he comes by, always asking if the cows are fine. Even the little ones, none of them look hurt or anything. They're all fine. However, literally the next evening, I hear the cows in distress in the distance. I think it's just one trying to regain rank or something in the herd. So I charged at another cow or something. The cows are pretty competitive in their group. They're always trying to gain a rank or lower another cow's rank. They even sometimes fight to the death. It's pretty brutal. I then decided to just continue sleeping for the night and check it out the next day. I do sleep with earbuds in, which, looking back, it's a terrible idea. The next day, I woke up to the bells of cows outside. All the cows are surrounding my cabin, just kind of standing around, not eating, which is very strange. I count them as I always do, and that's when I noticed that one cow is missing. I then call my boss and tell him what happened. He sounds extremely distressed now and just tells me to go look for it. He says that he can't come right now as he can't leave his post or something, So I spent some time looking for the missing cow, but I didn't find it anywhere. I then had to cut it short for a while though, as the weather randomly starts to get bad. The cows stay around the cabin that night, and it actually makes me feel a little bit safe. I still decided to take the hunting rifle out of the cabinet and put a wood cutting axe near the entrance. I'm not really sure what model it is, because I'm not really into guns like that. That night though, I noticed that something is weird. There seems to be some tiny red lights off in the distance. It's stormy and cloudy. The fog shouldn't really allow for light to come through like this, but there's nothing but wilderness in that direction, so I know it's not from a village or a car, but the light just stays there. I do get scared and close all the blinds. The light turns off at some point, leaving me in complete darkness. I check the battery next to my bed. It's empty. It was almost full a couple of hours ago. This thing lasts for a few days when it's only used to keep lights on in short showers. I then get scared even more. I use my phone flashlight to look for candles and matches. That's when those horrible howling noises return. But they sound a bit louder. It literally sounds like there are whispers within the sounds, but you can barely distinguish them. I'll lock the door and listen to my music on my phone all night to keep me distracted. I eventually pass out and wake up the next morning. The storm has cleared. However, the cow is still missing, and now 2 more of them are gone. I'm kind of going crazy at this point. I call my boss and I tell him everything that happened and everything that I heard and saw last night. He then tells me I have to leave immediately, and he'll come pick me up at the end of the road, and he does. I'm not sure what happened. The boss didn't talk that much on the way down the road, and he looked very pale. At this point I was too. I didn't even feel like talking. I ran into him at a bar a couple of months later. Apparently, he sold everything, and he's now invested in beer brewing or something. I asked him about the red lights, and he simply nervously chuckled and said it was most likely just some reflections, maybe from satellites or something else in the sky, especially since we're that high above sea level. I then told him about the strange noises that I was hearing, especially the howling and the whispers that seemed to be getting closer every night. He then looked at me dead in the eyes, and after a moment of silence, he just said he didn't hear anything. I didn't ask anything else after that. My kids always come into my room at night because they say that they're scared. Last night, my husband was still awake when they came in. They told him that someone was tapping on the bedroom window. My husband went to investigate. He told him it was most likely our dog or something. When he got to the room, that's when he could hear the tapping as well. It was 3 tapping sounds. He looked out the window and didn't see anything, so he went outside with a flashlight and looked as well. Nothing. He went back and closed the bedroom door and could hear the tapping again. Another 3. Also, every single night at 3 a.m., I always wake up. I think I hear my kids walking through the house as I hear the floor. It sounds like footsteps. I check and everyone is always asleep. I wait for my kids or an animal to appear, but nothing. Just the footsteps. Icing on the cake. My cabinets go haywire. It doesn't matter the time of day. My pants will fall inside the cabin, or they will open and close very quickly. I thought my dog or cat got into the cabinets a few times when I was cooking, but whenever I would check, there was nothing. I do have child locks on them, so they never fully open. I'm wondering what I should do to calm everything down, or stop it. I do have cedar above the doors, and I have also smudged a few times. I have heard that when things happen in 3 knocks, 3 scratches on the skin, 3 taps, whatever it is, it seems to be something evil, something that likes to stick around. This story is about my auntie. I can tell this story because I saw what happened. So So my auntie had some health problems and she went to doctor after doctor and they couldn't tell her what was wrong with her. She had a whole bunch of testing done and all the exams came out good and the doctor still couldn't figure out what was happening to her. So my grandmother talked to this medicine man about what was happening to her. So he told my grandmother to bring her out to see him before we entered the house. My grandmother said to not touch anything or to not take anything that hasn't been offered. So we were waiting on the couch for about 15 minutes, I would say. Finally, the medicine man, he told all of us to go into his room. And that's the first time I ever saw a medicine bundle. He said he was getting everything ready and even asking some things I didn't understand at that time. Then he asked my auntie to see her neck. The man put his hands on her neck like making a cup shape out of his hands. Then he put his hands to her neck. On one of those times he started breathing in and out, and he inhaled very loud. Then he coughed into his hands, and he showed us this dark black green slime. At least that's what I thought it was. Then the man said some things I couldn't understand. Just a few words like bad medicine and to be careful. It was really strange, and it freaked me out a lot. My grandmother never really explained what we saw and what was happening. She just left it at that. I do come from a very spiritual family, so that's why I think all these events that were happening to us were connected by our native spiritual culture in some way. And ever since then, my auntie hasn't had any health issues no more. Thanks for listening. My brother went to a town called Casa Grande to hit up a local bar. After the bar closed at 2 a.m., being drunk, he decided he wanted to come back home to Cells, our reservation. He ended up hitching a ride that was heading towards Cells. Halfway there, the people that he was with made a stop, and they told him that he was going to have to walk the rest of the way because they were turning towards another direction. So he put on his music and started walking. Pitch dark, he crossed a large bridge. On the other side of the bridge was a cemetery. He ended up crossing the cemetery. Shortly after this, he started hearing the sound of footsteps behind him. He said he turned around to see what was behind him, but it was too dark to see anything. He ended up walking backwards, and the sounds of the footsteps stopped. He decided to turn back around and try to run, but when he did, whatever it was right behind him again. That's when he just took off running. As he did, he saw an oncoming car was getting near him. Stupid him jumped in front of the car, but I guess depending on the situation that you're in, who knows what I would have done. Lucky for him, they stopped before hitting him. He told the people in the car what was happening, so they let him in. The only thing is that it was a truck with a full load of hay. He didn't care, so he climbed on top. He did end up making it home safe. And when he has a few drinks, he always tells me this terrifying story about a hoofed creature that scared the shit out of him. Don't ever wander the rest at night, especially on foot. I want to share a story with you about my winter deep in the Yukon with my grandfather and the strange things that occurred. Quick note, the story is a little long. About 3 years ago, when I was 18, I decided that I wanted to take a year off school before going to a university, kind of do a bit of soul searching, if you will. As it happened, my father decided that it would be a great opportunity. You see, my grandfather, Dana, had been trying to get me to go to his cabin for a few years now to learn a little bit about myself. My grandfather was the toughest SOB I ever seen in my life. An example, when I was around 15, my family took me skiing in Jasper, and my grandfather tagged along. During that trip, Dana hit a fallen log that had been slightly covered in snow, and he ended up going straight into a spruce tree. He tore his lip open down to the cheek, Once we caught up to him and started freaking out, talking about getting an ambulance, he calmly stood up, told us while his lip was hanging open enough to see his teeth that he would be fine and was just gonna go back to the lodge, well, to patch himself up. As it turned out, this involved skiing all the way back, grabbing a sewing needle and some fishing line, and stitching his own face back together in the bathroom mirror. About an hour later, he was back with us like nothing happened. He still has a pretty vicious scar too. A pretty massive guy, around 6'6", and he was very muscular despite being 60. He's a quiet guy. Again, he lives on his own in the middle of a frozen hellscape at a time in his life when most people would be retired and in a retirement home. The main reason why I hadn't gone with him sooner was because my mother was terrified of me going off to live with my crazy relative for any time, despite my father saying that I would be well taken care of and that I was old enough to fend for myself. But this year was different. I guess because I was going to move out soon anyway. I was allowed to leave and go with him. My family lives in Alberta, and my grandfather lives off the northwestern Yukon, past the Minto mine, just in case anyone knows this area. It was arranged for me to fly out and meet up with my grandfather, who would then drive us to his house. After landing, I was greeted with the amusing sight of my grandfather standing about a foot above the rest of the crowd, just staring, waiting for me. We had a quick greeting, and before long, I had hopped in his truck, and we were making trail towards places where no roads go. We drove for a few hours. Not a lot was said between us, even though that was pretty standard for him. And we finally arrived at what appeared to be a little more than a snowy plot near the tree line and away from the road. So, where exactly is your cabin? I didn't see it on the way over, I asked him. He turned to me and smirked. About 3 days of hiking that way. He pointed to the trees. Wow, so began day one of my adventure. Pack slung over my back and snow up to my calves. We then began to walk. The first day actually went pretty normal, something that was not gonna last. Along the way, he would point out animal tracks and different plants, giving me a basic wilderness survival rundown. Now, I had been raised on a small acreage outside of the also small town of Athabasca, so I was no stranger to the wilderness, but even still, my grandfather's knowledge of the wild seemed near encyclopedic. The first day came to a close as the sun hung low in the sky and the snow glittered in the twilight. A beautiful view. We found a small outcropping. We built a fire, set a can of beans and some veggies to cook, and enjoyed the moment. I slept pretty good, given that it was about -20. On the eve of the second day, I was shaken awake and told to start walking. We don't want to spend more nights out here than we have to. It's only going to get cold, and these woods are dangerous. Gathering up what little I had, little more than a sleeping bag, a few things and 2 knives, we set off again. Let me tell you, there's nothing more tiring than pushing through snow up to your crotch in the middle of the woods for hours and hours. I like to think I'm in pretty okay shape, but by the time that we stopped for a break some 4 hours later, I felt like I was gonna die. My grandfather, of course, seemed pretty unfazed by it. It was around this time that I started to take note of a few things. For anyone who has lived near or spent a lot of time in the woods, you know it's a pretty active place. Lots of noises and things moving around, but not here. In the winter, everything is still and quiet. A strange feeling when all you heard your entire life is that when things go quiet, something bad is near. My uneasiness was offset somewhat by the fact that I was still trying to see if my lungs were gonna explode. Soon enough, we would set off again. A few more hours into walking, I noticed a little cave in the hill we were on. The opening had huge icicles hanging down from the front, and a few bones scattered around the area. I turned to my grandfather and asked, pointing to it, should we be worried about that? At that, he stopped, looked at me for a few moments, then continued walking, saying something like, no, as long as we get a ways off before night, it won't matter. When we found a place to settle for the night, I was sure I would be out before I hit the ground, but with so much as a glance, I was told to wait. He was gonna get firewood and start dinner. Sitting by myself under a tree, I watched as he walked off, leaving me alone there. While I was sitting there, listening to the fading sound of my grandfather walking further and further away, I couldn't help but notice how strange the woods felt. I had spent days camping before, sometimes with friends, other times just by myself. But this was different. Maybe it was the quiet, or maybe it was how the simple act of turning my head seemed to echo through the trees. Maybe it was the way the evergreens burdened by the snow seemed to blend into the growing gloom, forming strange, inky shapes in the dim light. Whatever it was, I was starting to get nervous. The kind of unease that comes when you feel like somebody is watching you, even though you're quite sure you're alone. Before my mind started walking too far down those dark roads of thought, my grandfather came stomping back through the tree line, bundled with broken branches under his arm. He set about showing me how to start a fire without matches or a lighter. He's old-fashioned like that, and soon enough, we had a little nice campfire going. It wasn't until the heat of the fire hit me that I noticed how cold it was. My hands stiff, slight shivers going all around me. We should reach the cabin by about this time tomorrow, if we keep up the same pace. Before we go any further though, I want you to understand something. Things are different out here. If I tell you to do something, I expect you to listen. Understand? I nodded and told him my dad had given me a rundown before I left. Really now? How much did he tell you? Just to listen to whatever you say and to stay safe, I replied, unsure of where he was going with this. Alright then. He didn't say anything for the rest of the night, and I was too tired to ask. Despite that, I found that I laid awake for quite a while, staring up at the sky and listening to the crackling of the fire. I'm not sure why. I should have had no problem sleeping after the day of hiking, but regardless, I couldn't find myself to drift off, even after the moon had risen and shone over the area. It was around then that I heard something in the forest, like some sort of whispering, almost. At first, I figured it was just the wind, but looking at the treetops, they were not moving. I started to focus more on listening, but I couldn't make out what was being said. It was so faint, I sat up and looked around to see if something was there, or maybe my grandfather had been mumbling in his sleep. When I tried to listen again, I was met with silence. I figured it was just something on the breeze and laid back down again. Sleep came soon after that. I was once again awakened by my grandpa as the sun just began a slow creep up over the distant mountains. As we gathered everything, he asked me if I had slept well. I told him that the cold would take a little getting used to it, but other than that, I was fine. He sort of just looked at me for a moment before grumbling and tying off his pack. Once more, we set off deeper into the wilderness. The third day went without incident. It was only after a few more hours of tedious and exhausting trailblazing that we finally came into view, quote-unquote, home, built right up against a cliff face. There were no windows, just massive logs the whole way around. A small chimney rose up from the roof, easy to spot given the trees that had been cleared into a 20-meter radius around the cabin. As we got closer, I noticed that there were actually fence posts. There was even barbed wire, and just every so often, there was a much taller post set a ways back from the fence. In the dim light, I couldn't really make out much about it, even though I was curious as to why they were there. Whatever the reason, I was not in the mood to play 20 questions. I just wanted to get inside and sleep in a warm place for once. However, before we could get in, it seemed like there were a few things that had to be done. My grandfather lifted one of the fence posts off the ground, allowing us to enter, and told me to put it back and make sure it wasn't gonna fall. He said he was gonna go get the door open. It didn't take long. The snow around the cabin was much less than the surrounding area. It made the walking easier. After I finished, I made my way around the side of the cabin. I found my grandfather carefully taking down numerous little metallic things that were hanging over the door. I could see them from what little daylight was left, but I couldn't really make out exactly what they were supposed to be. Again, I was too tired to really care and just wandered inside behind my grandfather as soon as he finished taking down the last one. "That bed over there will belong to you," he said. Without much more thought, I went over and went to sleep. I really should have soaked in everything, as this was the last good night's rest I was going to get for a while. I woke up the next morning to a mostly dark room. A candle was set on the table in the middle of the cabin, giving enough light for me to figure out where the door was. Opening and stepping outside, I was greeted by a bright midday sun. Down the yard, I saw my grandfather clearing the excess snow from his plot of land. It was low enough that I could actually see the ground, and a few feet beyond the fence, the snow rose like a wall all around us. The 14 hours of sleep actually allowed me to take stock of the area around me. I could now see that the tall fencing posts from the night before had been chiseled or carved down so that only the pale hardwood remained. And carved all over the posts were words, thousands of them, tightly packed together. Reading through them, there really didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to what was written down. Mostly it was just a bunch of random words, mostly in Swedish and a few in Norwegian. I'm not really fluent, but I picked up a little bit over the last few years. I guess Dana had noticed me staring at it. "What are these supposed to be?" I gestured to a similar post around the yard. "A word wall," he said. "It helps keep things calm at night. I wouldn't stare at them too long though. It won't do much good for your head." In case it wasn't obvious enough already, my grandfather was different. He never liked staying in towns or normal houses, and he always carried these little small objects and charms on strings. I always found it neat, and when I was younger, I would often ask what they meant and listen to his stories for hours. My mother, though, always had a problem with him visiting. I did overhear my mom talking to my dad about allowing Dana to fill my head with crazy nonsense on more than one occasion, but my dad often shrugged it off, saying something like, "It's good for him to learn a little bit about Dad's culture." The point is that it was only after I just started to get a look at the cabin and the word wall that these things started to sink in. He was definitely a little strange at times. The first day, we went up to chop a few trees down for firewood, and he would very specifically point out the trees that we were going to cut. But this was only after pressing his ear to them and listening to see if they were unmarked. When I asked him what he meant by that, the Tom Tanisa will get angry, and we really don't want that. For those who don't know, Tom Tanisa are part of Scandinavian folklore. They basically look kind of like garden gnomes and act sort of like Santa Claus, or at least that's how they're portrayed now. But growing up, my grandfather would tell me about these little monsters and how they would chew open people's doors and windows, or crawl into houses at night and whisper things to a sleeping person. The people would sometimes go crazy, wandering out into the woods and just rambling on. Other times, they would just sort of be different. Either way, they were freaky little guys. But I kind of stopped believing in the stories during the same time that I stopped believing in Santa Claus. But my grandfather isn't really known for a sense of humor, so listening to him say that was more than a little strange. I sort of just laughed about it, and he looked at me and said, "You think I'm joking? Keep that up, and you won't be seeing the summer." That shut me up pretty quick. I didn't really buy the stories anyway, but I still made sure not to tap the trees that he said were marked. We finished loading up the sleds we had brought with us, and at that point, my grandfather said, "Let's go this way. I want to show you something before we get back." I followed him. It seemed to me like we were making a wide arc instead of going straight back, but I wasn't gonna argue. As we walked, I noticed that there were no animal tracks. Even on the way to the cabin, I had at least picked up a few prints from rabbits or moose and the like. When I asked why we weren't seeing any now, "They don't like it here. They know," to stay away. Why is that? I asked. These woods aren't safe for anyone after dark. After walking some more, we got to the edge of the section of the forest that we were in. Dana pointed out that beyond the tree line lay the vast snowy rises and falls of the untamed wild. Honestly, it was one of the most beautiful things I had ever seen. There was an overturned tree, and he motioned for me to sit on it. For a while, we just sat there, soaking in the view. Then he sighed. Now, I know you're going to be new to all of this for a while, but I think you should know things are different out here. I need you to trust me when I tell you to do something, or else I could get both of us killed. Do you understand? I said I did. He may be strange, but he means well, so I figured I would humor him, make things a little easier for both of us. That would prove to be a very bad idea. Once we got back and finished stacking the firewood, Dana broke out more of our own stuff that we had brought. As we were cooking, he said that tomorrow we would go hunting. If we caught anything, he would show me how to properly butcher the animal. We ate and settled in for the night, but as we were setting everything up, he told me that if I ever got up to use the outhouse at night, that I should always bring a candle, no matter how bright the moon was, and that if it went out, I should come back inside right away. With that, he set up a few things on the door. When I asked him about it, he told me it was there to confuse anything that was trying to get in. Later that winter, I found out that it was supposed to be a room for illusions or disguises. I guess the idea was that it would make it difficult to tell what was inside the cabin if something was trying to get in. The next few days we went out hunting. For the first little bit we didn't catch anything. It wasn't helped by the fact that we needed to go a certain distance from the cabin before we saw any signs of animal life. Dana always insisted that we be back before nightfall. On top of that, he didn't bring a gun, ever, just a bow and some arrows. I know bow hunting is common, enough practice, but given that bears roam these woods, I figure it would be nice to have something with a little bit more stopping power. When I mentioned this to him, he said it would cause more trouble than it would prevent. Eventually, we were able to find and snag a buck, a nice one too, enough meat to be alright for a while. We threw it on the sled and began dragging it back home. More hours went by. When we got back to the cabin, something rather interesting was waiting there for us. Some ravens. Normally, this wouldn't seem so strange, but when I hadn't seen any signs of life except for the trees in this area for almost a week, it seemed a little bit off. Dana actually stiffened up when he noticed it too. When I asked him about it, he told me, "Drop the sled and come with me. We're gonna have to butcher this fast." I wasn't quite sure what was going on, but I remember the conversation from earlier, and I figured it would be best to just keep my mouth shut and go along with it. We circled around the cabin, the raven sitting on the roof watching us the whole way. Lying in a small snowdrift in front of the door was a rabbit's head, just the head, cleanly cut off. The snow was still a little bright red, so it must have been a fresh kill. There was also something through the snow leading up to it, but it looked like it had been thrown in there. Well, that could be worse. We didn't really need the head anyways. When I asked what he was talking about, Dana told me, "It's only right to return a gift with a gift. Take that inside and meet me near the shed." The shed was a little ways off from the word wall, just a few feet beyond the tree line. That evening, we butchered the deer. When we were done, Dana took the head, antlers and all, and walked out into the woods a short way before gently setting it down. And coming back, we brought the rest of the meat into the cabin, and Dana took the rabbit's head off the table where I had placed it. That night, we had rabbit stew and potatoes. When I asked why we were just gonna eat something we found there, he told me it would be rude to just throw it out, and it isn't wise to insult the neighbors. There's more people here? I thought you lived alone, I asked. Alone? No, I just don't live by any sort of people. So, who's your neighbors? I thought I told you already. The Tom Tanisa lives here. I didn't really have a good response to that, to be honest. The next morning, we went out to check the fence, something that was becoming quite a routine. I walked out to where he had placed the deer head. It was gone. Not even a bit of blood was left. The next few weeks went by peacefully. We would collect firewood, go ice fishing, and every morning we would clear the snow away from the cabin. The temperature continued to drop as the winter solstice drew near, and the already short days became a few hours of twilight. You'd think it would get old seeing the same setting throughout the day, but you'll be wrong. It was breathtaking each and every single time. I should have stayed there staring at it all day if I wasn't being ushered along by Dana. Things would have continued much the same way if I hadn't screwed up one night. It was somewhere around mid-December. You start losing track of the days out here, especially when they are mostly night. And we were going ice fishing again. We set out pretty early, as the sun was just barely peeking over the distant mountain range, and hiked for about an hour until we got to a small frozen lake. We set about the usual, checking the thickness of the ice, cutting a hole. It had only been a few minutes when we heard it, the snapping and cracking of branches behind us. We both stopped and stared for a few moments before Dana said it was fine, even though I could tell he was bothered by it. Every so often, he would look over and scan the trees. We weren't having much luck with the fish and were about to call it a day when I got a tug on my line. I pulled up a big one and thought, great, we haven't had fish in a while. I turned to see if Dana had noticed. I saw him just sort of staring at it, a little confused. When I looked more closely, I saw that the fish had a few gashes taken out of it, little lines cutting along the gray scales. Throw it back. This isn't ours to take, Dana said. Alright then. I was a little nervous, even though nothing happened during my time there. I was able to pick that up when Dana got weird like this. It was best not to argue. I threw the fish back into the pond, and we started making tracks back to the cabin. Along the way, I noticed that the trees near the lake, the ones where the noise had come from, had huge cuts taken out of them, not like an axe or bear claws, more like small chunks that had been ripped out and thrown around. I then asked what that was about, and Dana just started walking faster and said, "We're not gonna come back here. It wouldn't be safe." One of my more frequent chores was to go out and make sure that the word walls posts were still secure in the ground. One of the many things that my grandfather was really strict about was keeping the wall just right. The word wall came second only to our food stores. This mostly involved going out and giving the posts a solid shove. If there was any shift, I would need to hammer them back in and pack the snow tighter around the bottom until I could no longer get them to move. Anyways, that night, Dana insisted that we go over all of them again before going to sleep. So we went out after finishing dinner, mostly deer. You'll be surprised how long a single deer can last. Dana took one end of the yard, and I took the other. It was getting really cold outside, to the point where any bare skin started to sting. A cloud cover had swept over the land, and there were no stars nor the moon tonight. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving everything in the inky black and gray. It was quiet again, like on the hike up here, where every little movement you made sounded like an earthquake. A little ways off, I could hear my grandfather working, the shifting of his coat, the snow being pressed underfoot. I had already done about 3 posts when I found one that was a little bit loose. I was able to get it straight, and then I picked up the sledgehammer we used for driving them back into the ground. As I lifted up the hammer to get ready to bring it down on the post, I cringed, knowing that the sounds in the forest would be very loud. Just as I was about to swing, I heard something, like a quiet hissing mumble. I swung around while I was bringing the hammer down, hitting the post with a glancing blow and knocking it off center. Spinning around, I tried to listen for it again, thinking that maybe it was just my imagination. The woods will often make you think you're hearing things. After a few seconds of nothing, I figured it was just me imagining things, or overhearing Dana talking to himself. I turned to start fixing the post again, but just as I put my back to the trees, I heard it again. It seemed so quiet that I couldn't make out what was being said. but I was so sure that someone was whispering quickly and in a whistle-like tone. I already started to freak out now. I slowly began walking towards the cabin, my back to it and the cliff face. As I scanned the trees looking for where the sound was coming from, the noise didn't seem like it had a direction. It was like it was everywhere at once, still quiet, but it was very much there. While in panic mode, combined with being tired and cold, I got it in my head that if I threw something into the woods, it might scare off whoever or whatever was there. Reaching into the woodpile we had outside, I picked up a small log and threw it into the tree line. I started shouting, "Who's ever out there, you better come out now." My grandfather then came running over. "What the fuck are you doing?" I told him I heard someone talking nearby, but before he could say anything, the trees where I threw the log started to shake, and I could hear branches snapping. "Get inside right now," he said, not taking his eyes off the trees. So the two of us backpedaled into the cabin. By the time that we closed the door, most of the trees had started shaking. The once oppressive stillness of the woods replaced with something like that of a hurricane. That night, Dana nor me slept. We just sat there staring at the door, and he was clutching his hunting knife. Throughout the night, all the sounds didn't die down. It was so loud and violent that I thought the trees must be snapping in half. Periodically, we would hear things hitting the cabin wall. Thumps, crunches, and ripping noises from every direction. I told myself that it was just branches and debris being thrown by the storm. But deep down, I wasn't sure. I didn't know. About an hour before dawn, things started to settle down. Soon enough, my grandfather got up and went outside. I heard him start swearing, so I hurried after him to see what had been done. The outside walls of the cabin had been covered, every inch from top to bottom, with what seemed to be words everywhere, violently slashed into the wood. Chunks had been ripped out of the corners of the door, and the fence was in ruins. Some of the barbed wire had been thrown into the treetops, and many of the posts had been smashed. After a string of curses I could barely even understand, Dana started to calm down. "Never fucking do that again. Never. We need to get this fucking fence fixed before nightfall." And just like that, he set off to start gathering the broken fence. At this point, I had gone from thinking my grandfather was a little crazy to thinking that he might actually know something I didn't. I then helped them pick up the scattered remains of the fence. Every so often, we would find little bits of fabric or hair stuck to the barbs. At this point, I didn't want to ask anything. We were making good time repairing the barbed wire, but I was still worried. Most of the posts that made up the work wall had been broken down and were missing. When I asked them about this, Dana said, "They won't like it, but hopefully they just did this as a warning. Tomorrow, we're gonna go hunting, and we're gonna bring them back something to thank them for not killing us last night." At this point in the year, there were only about 6 hours of daylight, making it very difficult to do anything at all. We were able to get the barbed wire back into a rough semicircle around the cabin. Given the damage from the night before, I asked how much good the barbed wire would actually do. He told me that it wouldn't stop them, but it would slow them down, since their beards and hats would get tangled in it, and they would have a hard time getting free. I couldn't tell if he was trying to joke or not, but at this point, I was about ready to believe anything. Little did I know, I hadn't seen anything yet. The problem was that by this time, it was almost December 21st. The cold was near unbearable, and there was so little daylight. By the time that we got to the part of the wild where the animals roam, it was nearly time to head back. The first day, we looked for signs of animals we could bag, but we didn't even see a squirrel. That night, the wind was blowing pretty strong again, and the cabin was creaking to the point where I thought it might collapse on us. All the while, I stared at the cracks between the log walls, where the candlelight didn't reach. I could swear I saw things moving in the dark. When I finally did drift off to sleep, the last thing I heard was a quiet whispering. Just like before, the next few days were no better. Every time we went deeper into the woods, usually in the way of the distant mountains, The cold was bone-chilling, so much that walking was a challenge for me. I have no idea how my grandfather was able to at his age, but he never slowed down. Yet, we returned empty-handed every time. Each night, the woods became loud. The shadows in the cabin seemed to draw closer to the candle more than the night before, and the whispering started to grow more intense. It got to the point where I could make out some words, though none of them were in English or any other language that I knew of. I couldn't understand them. On the third night, I asked my grandpa if he could hear it as well. He simply told me not to think about it. Each day was more overcast than the one before. The daylight was just a lighter shade of gray, and it was getting to the point where our food stores were running low. Our need to find something became desperate. Things started to get worse by the fifth day. It started to snow again, but not the soft, puffy snow that you see further south. This was big, heavy, wet flakes that seemed more like little snowballs falling everywhere, clinging to everything and weighing us and the trees down. All the while, we went through the misty forest, where we could barely see anything more than a few meters in front of us. I swear I kept seeing things out there, little shapes sitting on rocks or in the branches of trees. They would be there one moment, then disappear as soon as I looked directly at them. I asked my grandfather about it, and he told me not to pay attention to them, but just to keep moving. The longer the days went, the more of those shapes I saw. On the ninth day of trying to hunt something, we returned to the cabin and were greeted by a troubling sight. Along the tree line surrounding the cabin, a few meters from the barbed wire fence, were a number of stones, big boulders, each about chest height. Some of them were shaped weird, with their tops curving off in different directions. They were all pointing at the cabin and had been placed every few feet along the tree line. When my grandfather saw this, he stopped and said, "Pack your things. We're leaving at dawn." I wasn't going to argue at this point, even after we got past the fence and closed the door. I felt like we were still being watched from somewhere out in the snow. It was too dark to see any of the little shapes anymore, especially the ones that had been following us whenever we went outside. But I knew they were still there. We didn't sleep long. Sometime in the middle of the night, between the wind blowing, there was a crash, and the door split down the middle. Frost and snow started flying in, and it blew out the only candle. Before we even knew what happened, there was a weird noise. After a few seconds, my grandfather was able to get a little oil lantern going that was hanging by the wall. The table and pantries had been overturned. Everything that wasn't nailed down was either broken or thrown around the room. I asked if we should leave right now, but he told me, "That's exactly what they want us to do. We'll wait until first light." It was the longest night of my life. We sat there, shivering and staring at the broken door, the lantern's light just barely keeping the dark, and who knows what else at bay. Several times, I thought I saw something there, just outside the door, watching. When I saw the horizon getting brighter, it was like waking from a nightmare, only this one wasn't over yet. We grabbed whatever hadn't been broken and made for civilization. The snow had stopped, but the clouds still hung heavy above us. It would be 3 days until we got to the truck. We moved as fast as we could. The snow was so deep that we had to stop every few meters or so just to wipe it off. It would continuously weigh us down. I don't know how far we traveled. I know we didn't stop, and I don't think we ate until it started getting dark. My grandfather said to get as much firewood as I could. He said we were going to need a big fire. But what about the marked trees? I said to him. I still wasn't sure if things could get worse. Fuck them all. They're already pissed off, and it won't matter much now. Just get as much as you can. That night, we had a massive bonfire going. I bet you could see it from one of the mountains. It was so bright. Even so, we could still hear them out there. The whispering would never stop. Every now and then, a branch or rock would come flying at us or in the fire. It didn't make for a restful night. You know, it was serious at this point when grandfather had violated his own rules, you can say. Around an hour before dawn, the snow started again. The second day was worse yet. With the snow back, the little things got brave and started coming in close. Every now and then, we would get hit with something that fell from tree branches, or a tree along our path would fall down and make it more difficult to go through. We didn't walk. We ran through the woods as much as we could. I didn't think I could run so far, but I don't remember either of us stopping. We were able to stumble into a little clearing as the light was fading again. We quickly grabbed whatever wood we could find and tried to start a fire. However, the wood was wet and the shadows started to close in. We could see the little moving figures at the edge of our vision once again. I guess Grandpa was getting his wits end because he grabbed a little oil lantern and broke it open, pouring the oil across the logs and lighting it up with the lantern sparker. The shadows retreated for a moment, and I think whatever they were started getting angry. We were left mostly alone that night. I don't know why. Maybe they needed to rest sometimes too. Shit, I don't know at this point. The snow hadn't quit yet, so by the time that we woke up, we were both mostly covered. We set out before the sun rose. I think Grandpa didn't trust us to make the rest of the way with only a few hours of light. The trail was a mess. Trees and rocks littered the animal trails, and the bush was so thick with evergreens that it was no better. It was slow going, and of course, we were still being followed. We would still catch sight of them at the edge of our vision, watching and whispering in tune with the wind. For whatever reason, we were left mostly untouched the rest of the way back. The poor trail conditions slowed us down to the point that it was already dark, and we still hadn't made it to the truck. However, my grandpa didn't want to stop. He said we were close and didn't want to risk another night outside. I'm not sure when it was, but eventually we made our way out of the trees and onto a road. We followed it for a few minutes until we saw it, the glorious steed that would get us out of that place, covered only a few feet of snow. Even though we were freezing and exhausted, we swept off the truck bed, threw our things inside, and drove off. I don't think either of us looked back. After we got back to town, we stayed at a hotel for the night. Well, at an inn. It was actually the best rest of my life. We woke up early and drove the entire day until we got to the Eric Nelson Airport. When we got back, my grandpa stayed with my family for a little bit after my dad convinced them. We didn't talk much about the trip, just that we needed to come home early. That spring, my grandpa left and said that he was going to go back home. I asked him what in the hell he was thinking going back there, and he told me that he had lived in those woods for almost 20 years. It was his home, and he was going to stay there for as many years as he had left. However, he promised that he would call or visit whenever he could. That was 3 years ago, and none of us have heard anything from him. My parents are convinced that he passed away. They might be right, but I can't help wanting to know. And that's where we're at today. I told my friends about what happened. They don't really buy it, but I can't blame them. They've been talking on and off for about a year now about going on a camping trip, and I mentioned that maybe we should go up to my grandfather's cabin. They thought it was a great idea. We're currently in the Sky Motel in Whitehorse, and we're gonna leave tomorrow morning. I'm still convinced that this is a bad idea, but I want to know what happened with my grandpa when he came back out here. We planned for the trip to be a little less than a month, and of course we picked summer since I think it's safer than the dead of winter like last time. So this will be the last time that I post until I come back. I hope to update you all pretty soon, but if you don't hear from me, there's a reason why I told you the name of the locations, including the motel